Chapter 569. Zheng Yuan shouted loudly, making Su Chan and Zhou Qin feel as if their souls were about to fly out of their bodies. Zi Yuan was so scared that she shivered all over. Even though she was usually calm and composed, when she suddenly saw the Hell Wuzhang enchanting jade pouncing on her, she couldn't help but turn pale with fright. In an instant, she flew far away. Go to the internet. 7 KOM. Zheng Yuan, on the other hand, wanted to catch Zi Yuan first, and then catch Zhou Qin and Su Chan, so he immediately chased after her. Zheng Yuan's Hell Wuzhang enchanting jade was an extremely vicious, powerful magical weapon. It was unstoppable when used when others were caught off guard. However, Zi Yuan happened to have seen him use it before, so she was on guard. Moreover, she was one of the few cultivators in the cultivation world who had studied powerful magical weapons and magic very well, so she knew the shortcomings and advantages of the Hell Wuzhang enchanting jade. Zi Yuan's figure flashed far away in an instant. As she dodged the roaring undead and Zheng Yuan, she quickly sent a voice transmission to Su Chan, "Su Chan, take Zhou Qin and Chris and run." The weakness of this Hell Wuzhang enchanting jade is that it can only capture one person's soul at a time, and it can only lock onto the target within 50 feet. I'll hold Zheng Yuan back now. You guys run. Su Chan was stunned and quickly told Zhou Qin what she had said. Although Zhou Qin was still in a state of shock, she was, after all, a lady from a noble family who had seen great storms. She took a deep breath and immediately calmed down. She thought quickly and said, "No, Zi Yuan can't handle it alone." Since Zi Yuan said that Zheng Yuan's powerful magical weapon can only target one person at a time, why don't Zi Yuan be in charge of luring the enemy while you and I attack from the side? Su Chan was stunned for a moment, then her eyes lit up and she said loudly, "Good idea." But she quickly added, "However, Sister Zhou Qin, your yang spirit is not proficient in flying, so you can't go. Otherwise, if Zheng Yuan turns around and attacks you, it will be bad. Why don't I cooperate with Sister Zi Yuan? I'm fast, so he can't catch me." Zhou Qin thought for a moment. She also knew that this was not the time to argue, so she said decisively, "Okay. Be careful. I'll take Chris and the others away first, so that they won't be a burden to you." Su Chan nodded and quickly flew into the air, rushing towards Zheng Yuan. Although Zheng Yuan was older, his cultivation was not much higher than Zi Yuan's. Therefore, he could never catch up with her in terms of speed. He was always a distance away from her, especially with the Hell Wuzhang enchanting jade in his hand. It was always a step away from Zi Yuan, but he could never catch up with her. Just as Zheng Yuan was getting angry, he suddenly felt a gust of wind coming from the side. He turned his head and saw Su Chan approaching him like a ghost, holding a hairpin in her hand and stabbing it into his waist. Zheng Yuan hadn't expected that a three-tailed fox spirit like Su Chan would dare to offend him. He was furious and couldn't care less about anything else. He mobilized the Hell Wuzhang enchanting jade and pointed it at Su Chan, shouting, "Su Chan." Su Chan was so scared that her whole body trembled. Without thinking, she turned around and ran. Before the ghost of the Hell Wuzhang enchanting jade could reach her, she disappeared in the blink of an eye. In the world, if a fox spirit said that she was the second best at escaping, no one would dare to say that they were the best. Su Chan was even more cunning. When she made up her mind to escape, she really disappeared without a trace. Her speed was even faster than Zi Yuan's. Zheng Yuan hadn't expected Su Chan to be so fast. He was stunned for a moment. The ghost of the Hell Wuzhang enchanting jade whistled past him and chased after Su Chan. At this time, Zi Yuan also came to her senses in the distance. After the Hell Wuzhang enchanting jade had flown far away, she immediately drove her ninth heaven Zi Yuan silk to attack Zheng Yuan. Only then did Zheng Yuan realize that this was their guerrilla tactic of, when the enemy advances, I retreat, when the enemy retreats, I advance. Feeling ashamed and angry, he immediately gritted his teeth and controlled the Hell Wuzhang enchanting jade to fight with Zi Yuan's powerful magical weapon. For a moment, the three of them were engaged in a fierce battle in midair. Zi Yuan and Zheng Yuan were fighting from a distance. As soon as she saw the ghost pouncing on her, she turned around and ran away. When the distance was wide enough, Su Chan suddenly appeared and attacked Zheng Yuan fiercely. Although Su Chan's cultivation was not high, she was still a cultivator in the Zhuji phase. Moreover, she was attacking the vital parts. If Zheng Yuan was hit, he would definitely not be able to bear it. However, Zheng Yuan didn't have enough powerful magical weapons at hand, so he couldn't fight two people at the same time. If he concentrated his strength on one person, the other would take advantage of it. Lin Xueqing, in particular, had also recovered from the grief of losing her master. She let out an angry roar and rushed forward like crazy. For a moment, the four of them were fighting back and forth in the air. At this time, Zhou Qin quickly returned to Chris, John, and Alba and said to them, "Let's go." Chris and the other two had no idea what was going on. John asked blankly, "What happened?" Zhou Qin urged anxiously with a sullen face, "Don't ask. If you want to live, leave quickly." Chris raised her head and looked at the four people fighting in the air with the help of the moonlight. She was stunned, and for a moment, her feet seemed to have been rooted to the ground and she couldn't move at all. Alba also asked with a blank face, "What happened?" As soon as she finished speaking, a thunderous roar suddenly came from the sky. It was Zheng Yuan, who had seen through Lin Xueqing's anger and eagerness for revenge. With a loud roar, the Hell Wuzhang enchanting jade instantly locked onto her figure, rushed into her body, and hooked out all her 3 souls and 7 spirits. As soon as Lin Xueqing's soul was gone, her body immediately fell straight to the ground, right in front of Alba with a bang, and was badly mutilated. Alba was so shocked that her body froze. She touched her face with trembling hands, only to see a few drops of hot blood stuck to her face, which was scarlet and ferocious. Alba couldn't help but let out a shrill scream. As if she had infinite strength, she turned around and fled. Although Chris was also trembling with fear at the scene in front of her, she was still calm and quickly shouted, "Alba, don't run around." Alba, on the other hand, was so frightened that she had lost her mind. She ran all the way in extreme panic and kept falling down. After falling down, she got up in a hurry and then fell down again. Chris stamped her feet and immediately chased after her. John hurriedly shouted, "Chris!" Zhou Qin saw that although they were running away in panic, they had finally moved. She shouted at John, "Stop shouting and catch up with them." John seemed to wake up from a dream and hurriedly chased after them. Of the 4 of them, one was running desperately in front, while the other 2 were chasing after her desperately. Zhou Qin was looking around vigilantly, chasing after her while retreating. Under the stimulation of death, people could always stimulate their infinite potential. Alba, who had been so tired that she was about to collapse, was running like crazy at this time, as if she didn't know fatigue. She ran wherever she could, and in a panic, she ran into the Huangshan cableway. By the time Chris and John, who were chasing after her, came to their senses, they had already run into the Huangshan cableway. They were halfway up the mountain, and the strong wind was blowing around them. The chains of the cableway were clanking, and they felt as if they were stepping on waves and would be knocked down at any time. Chris and John grabbed the chain of the ropeway in horror and shouted at Alba, "Alba, stop. Do you want to die? Look around." At this time, Alba's potential had been overdrawn. When she heard the shouts of Chris and John, she immediately stopped and looked around blankly. She saw that on one side of her was a steep cliff, and on the other side was a dark abyss. She was in a steep, high-altitude cableway. Alba gasped violently and stuck her head out of the cableway to take a look. She saw that there was an abyss under her feet, like the bloody mouth of a demon, which would swallow her at any time. Especially at this time, a gust of wind blew, causing the cableway to sway like a huge wave, almost throwing Alba over. Alba was so shocked that her legs went soft. Her body involuntarily tilted and she fell down the cliff. When Chris and John saw this, they screamed in horror and collapsed on the ropeway. Behind them, Zhou Qin's heart suddenly tightened. She gritted her teeth and rushed over. Like a startled swan, she quickly flashed to Alba's side. At this time, Alba's body had already fallen out of the cableway. Without thinking, Zhou Qin immediately jumped out of the cableway and grabbed Alba's arms with both hands as if she were fishing for the moon. Then, she hooked her ankle hard on the iron chain of the cableway and stabilized her body. Zhou Qin grabbed Alba by a hair's breadth and hung upside down on the cableway. She gritted her teeth, shook her wrist, and shouted, "Go up." Alba was immediately thrown onto the cableway like a sandbag. Chris and John saw it accurately, so they reached out at the same time and hurriedly caught Alba. At this time, Alba was already scared out of her wits. She was trembling all over, her limbs trembling, and she couldn't even stand up. Chris and John saw that Zhou Qin, who was hanging upside down on the cableway, suddenly turned and jumped up from under the cableway like a swallow. Americans worshipped heroes the most. Although Chris and John were still in shock, they couldn't help but exclaim in admiration and surprise. Their eyes involuntarily showed strong worship. But before they could speak, they heard a burst of sparse applause coming from the end of the cableway. Curious, Chris and John turned their heads and saw a fashionably and sexily dressed woman walking toward them with a sneer on her face, clapping her hands. The woman's eyes were fixed on Zhou Qin. Her hands were clapping slower and harder, as if death was approaching. She sneered and said, "Good skills, good kung fu. No wonder you've jumped several times." As she said this, she poked her head out of the cableway and took a look. She smiled and said, "No wonder you're so high. You're not afraid at all." Zhou Qin suddenly saw the woman and frowned. She said in a low voice, "Ding Nan. Why are you here?" The woman was Ding Nan. She sneered at Zhou Qin and said, "If you can be here, why can't I?" Zhou Qin saw that Ding Nan's eyes were full of hostility and murderous intent. She asked warily, "What are you doing here?" Ding Nan laughed and said, "What am I doing here?" As she said this, Ding Nan's face suddenly became extremely ferocious. She snapped, "What am I doing? I'm here to kill you." Chapter 570. Ding Nan's appearance made the Huangshan cableway look murderous under the night sky. Zhou Qin looked at Ding Nan coldly and said in a deep voice, "Ding Nan, what kind of grudge do we have? Do we have to solve it at this time?" Ding Nan smiled coldly. She looked around and said, "Isn't this place good? The moon is dark and the wind is strong. It's a good time to kill and set fire." Zhou Qin watched Ding Nan approach step by step. She quickly winked at Alba, who was paralyzed on the suspension bridge, and whispered, "Let's go." However, Alba was so scared that her whole body was weak. She couldn't even stand up, let alone walk away. She had almost died just now, and at this moment, she was holding the iron chain desperately and refused to let go. How could she move at all? Zhou Qin frowned and shouted to Chris and Hardadef, "Take her and leave." Chris and John looked at Ding Nan blankly, and then at Zhou Qin. It seemed that they couldn't understand why the two sisters, who had been inseparable in the past, had suddenly turned against each other. Go to the internet. Zhou Qin saw that the two of them were also staring at her blankly. She immediately shouted and roared, "Are you deaf? Go! Do you want to die?" Chris and John were shocked by Zhou Qin's words. They subconsciously wanted to help Alba stand up, but Ding Nan laughed and said, "You want to leave? Did you ask for my permission?" After that, a golden light flashed in her hand, and a golden electric light pierced toward Chris. Zhou Qin's pupils suddenly shrank, and her hand quickly reached for her waist. With a swoosh, the Vulcan's whip, like a poisonous snake, swung toward the golden light. With a snap, the Vulcan's whip accurately hit the golden light in the air, making a crisp sound like a firecracker. The golden light was hit and suddenly shook. It spun a few times and flew toward Ding Nan, then stopped steadily beside her. It was a golden hairpin, which was Imo Ashi's threaded hairpin of soul traversal. Zhou Qin stared at the threaded hairpin of soul traversal beside Ding Nan with vigilance. She said with some surprise, "You've reached the Zhuji phase? Is this your powerful magical weapon?" Ding Nan laughed out loud and said proudly, "Zhou Qin, do you think that I will always be like a shadow, always following behind you and being overshadowed by your light? Humph, let me tell you, sooner or later, Ding Nan will surpass you, defeat you, and trample you under my feet. I'll let you have a taste of the humiliation I suffered back then." Zhou Qin looked at her former classmate and friend in front of her with a complicated look in her eyes. She suddenly had a sense of vicissitudes of life, as if the days when she and Ding Nan were inseparable from each other on campus were swaying before her eyes in a trance, vivid in her mind, as if they were within reach. But Ding Nan in front of her looked so familiar, but Zhou Qin felt so strange. It wasn't that Zhou Qin didn't know that they would eventually become enemies, that they would eventually turn against each other, and that they would eventually become mortal enemies. But she hadn't expected that this day would come so quickly and so suddenly. Zhou Qin shook her head secretly and sighed softly. "Ding Nan, why are you doing this?" As she said this, she took a deep breath, and a cold light bloomed in her eyes. She said, "Let them go. Don't involve them in the grudge between the two of us." Ding Nan smiled coldly. "Have you ever thought about the grudge between you and Zhao Yujian? Don't you want to drag me into it?" As she said this, she suddenly opened her eyes and pointed at Chris and the others. The threaded hairpin of soul traversal beside her suddenly turned into countless golden lights, rushing toward Chris, John, and Alba like a torrential rain. At this time, Chris and the others saw countless golden hairpins suddenly appear in the air and stab them. Any one of them would definitely make a bloody hole in their bodies. The three foreigners had come from a foreign country. They hadn't expected that their cultivation journey, which they thought would be smooth sailing, would turn out to be such a terrible thing. Just when they thought that they were going to die, they suddenly heard the sound of the wind whistling in their ears. Then, a fiery red snake quickly flew in front of them, forming an impenetrable barrier that firmly blocked the threaded hairpin of soul traversal. However, after the threaded hairpin of soul traversal was blocked and scattered in all directions, it quickly turned back and quickly jumped up along the Vulcan's whip in Zhou Qin's hand. Like a small snake swimming along the vines, it quickly attacked Zhou Qin's wrist. Zhou Qin frowned and immediately shook her wrist. With a swoosh, the long whip in her hand shook straight like a long spear. In an instant, a strong Yuan Qi was penetrated through the whip, and it shook the threaded hairpin of soul traversal that was swimming along the long whip into pieces. The fight between Zhou Qin and Ding Nan only lasted for a split second. Chris, John, and Alba saw the golden light and the red light in front of them fighting. The scene was even more thrilling and exciting than a Hollywood blockbuster. But in the blink of an eye, they saw that the surroundings had returned to normal, as if what they had just seen was just an illusion. John was tongue-tied and stammered, "God, are all the people in China superhuman?" Chris also widened her eyes and stared at Zhou Qin, her eyes full of fanaticism and excitement. Only Alba's eyes were full of remorse. She hated herself for coming to this terrible country and encountering such a terrible thing. For a moment, she burst into tears, and her cries echoed continuously on the silent Huangshan cableway. However, Zhou Qin didn't seem to hear her crying. All her attention was locked on Ding Nan. She said lightly, "Ding Nan, give up. Go back and cultivate for a while before coming back. You are no match for me. With my Vulcan's whip in hand, you are already no match for me. When I take out the Chiwe, you will definitely die. Ding Nan didn't buy it at all. She sneered and said, Who said I was going to fight with you? Do you think I'm a fool? As she said this, she smiled coldly. The threaded hairpin of soul traversal beside her suddenly flashed and instantly flew more than 10 meters behind Zhou Qin. The golden light flashed a few times, and there was a clanging sound of iron cutting in the distance. Zhou Qin was shocked and said angrily, Ding Nan, you are too vicious. However, Ding Nan laughed and said, I'm vicious? When you pushed me down the stairs, did you ever think about how vicious you were? At this time, Zhou Qin had no time to defend herself. The connection of the cableway more than 10 meters behind her had been completely cut off by the threaded hairpin of soul traversal. Even if she used the Vulcan's whip, it would be too late for her to stop it. Just as the threaded hairpin of soul traversal cut off the last iron nail of the cableway behind Zhou Qin, she suddenly felt her body sink down. Zhou Qin's mind raced, and her reaction was astonishingly fast. At this time, she was not proficient in flying, and there was the threat of Ding Nan in front of her. Therefore, she immediately shook her wrist, and the tip of the whip quickly wrapped around the rock behind her. At the same time, she shouted to Chris and the others, Hold on. As soon as she finished speaking, the cableway under her feet suddenly fell. Chris, John, and Alba let out a shrill scream at the same time and fell into the abyss like meteorites. Zhou Qin was quick to react. She reached out and grabbed Chris with a snap. Chris also grabbed Hardadef. When Hardadef saw a person falling next to him, he also subconsciously grabbed Alba's clothes. The four of them hung in the air like a string of gourds, swaying back and forth against the cliff wall as if they were swinging back and forth. Although Zhou Qin's Jindan body was stronger than ordinary people's, she still felt a little overwhelmed by supporting the strength of 3 adults with one hand. What's more, at this time, they were facing a powerful enemy. Her hands were tied, so she had no power to fight back. Zhou Qin gritted her teeth and immediately used the strength of the 4 of them to swing back and forth. She suddenly swung her hand and shouted, Go up. With this swing, Chris, John, and Alba were thrown into the air like sandbags. They were dislocated one after another. Alba fell on the cableway behind Ding Nan. The pain made her limbs feel like they were about to fall apart. She lay on the cableway and kept crying for a while. Chris's body was still in the air when she discovered that there was a pine tree sticking out from a crack in the rock in front of her. She immediately reacted quickly and used both hands to hug the tree trunk, stopping her body in mid-air. As soon as she held the tree trunk firmly, she saw John flying past her. Chris immediately reached out and grabbed him. However, John was tall, strong, and heavy. The pine tree on the cliff had to bear the strength of 2 people at once, and it suddenly made a creaking sound. It was so horrible that it made people's hair stand on end. Chris and John, who were still in a state of shock, felt their hair stand on end. At this moment of life and death, the 2 of them stared blankly at the pine tree that was breaking apart bit by bit. Their eyes stared fixedly at the roots that were being pulled out of the cracks bit by their strength. At this moment, they could smell the sinister breathing of the Grim Reaper. John suddenly turned his head, and his voice became extremely calm. He said to Chris, Chris, promise me one thing. An ominous thought flashed through Chris's mind. She immediately said in horror, No, John, what do you want to do? Hardadef looked at Chris with incomparable seriousness and said, Chris, you're the smartest and have the best qualifications. Master will definitely take you as a disciple. If you also go to heaven in the future, if you have the chance, you must tell me, what kind of feeling is cultivation? As he said this, John smiled slightly at Chris and suddenly let go of his hands. Chris suddenly let out a heart-wrenching scream. No! She suddenly reached out and tried to grab John, but she grabbed his sleeve and tore it off with a ripping sound. John's body still fell, and in the blink of an eye, he was swallowed up by the abyss. For a moment, the night wind in the valley was howling, and Chris's cries echoed. At this time, Alba was so frightened that she forgot to cry. She stared blankly at the dark and boundless abyss, as if she had frozen into a statue. At this time, Zhou Qin wanted to save John, but it was too late. She could only watch him fall into the cliff valley. Zhou Qin suddenly became furious and shouted, "Ding Nan, you deserve to die." With a shake of her wrist, Zhou Qin's body suddenly burst forward. There was an amazing force between her legs, and her whole body was almost at a perpendicular angle to the rock surface. Her feet stepped on the steep cliff, and she rushed toward Ding Nan like crazy. Chapter 571. Ding Nan had always had a natural fear and inferiority complex towards Zhou Qin. This fear and inferiority complex came from the depths of her heart, so much so that she refused to admit it herself. Go to the internet. 7 KOM. At first, this fear and inferiority complex stemmed from Zhou Qin's powerful background and family, but slowly, their fates changed and they both became cultivators. Even so, Ding Nan was extremely unwilling to accept that Zhou Qin could still suppress her in cultivation. Especially after the Taoist assembly, Zhou Qin's fierce and desperate style had greatly shocked Ding Nan, which made her subconsciously believe that she could not beat Zhou Qin, so she had to use despicable means to have a little hope of winning. For the sake of this tiny hope of winning, Ding Nan wouldn't mind a few people dying, even if they were once her classmates. Therefore, when Ding Nan saw Zhou Qin suddenly become furious and desperate, she immediately took a few steps back in fear. She didn't dare to fight her head-on at all and subconsciously wanted to escape. However, Ding Nan had only taken a few steps back when she saw Alba not far away, staring blankly at the dark abyss of the cliff valley. She suddenly had an idea. Her figure flashed, and her 5 fingers were like hooks as she quickly grabbed Alba's throat. Ding Nan shouted sternly, "How dare you kill me? I'll kill her right now." At this time, Zhou Qin had just rushed in front of her, and the Vulcan's whip in her hand almost tore the air and flung it at Ding Nan's face. Seeing that Ding Nan had taken Alba hostage, Zhou Qin immediately shook her wrist, and the Vulcan's whip brushed past Ding Nan's cheek and Alba's body. With a bang, it hit the cliff wall, smashing the hard rock into pieces, and countless gravel splashed everywhere. Zhou Qin was so angry that her whole body was trembling. She approached Ding Nan step by step on the ropeway and said angrily, "Ding Nan, are you crazy? Have you lost your humanity?" Ding Nan laughed angrily and dragged Alba back step by step. She said, "I've lost my humanity? When you pushed me downstairs, did you have any humanity?" Zhou Qin was furious. "Did I push you? It was obviously your own mistake." Ding Nan said angrily, "What's the difference between that and you pushing me?" Agitated, Ding Nan tightened her grip on Alba's throat. Alba's face immediately turned purple and she struggled desperately, but Ding Nan's fingers were like iron hooks strangling her throat, making it impossible for her to break free. Zhou Qin immediately slowed down. She took a deep breath and said in a cold voice, "Ding Nan, do you think Xiao Yujian would have let you go even if I had jumped down myself? Even if Xiao Yujian let you go, do you think my family would let you go? If I die, you and your family will die. If I live, your family will live a better life. Life and death, it's a simple multiple-choice question. Tell me, if you were me, what would you choose?" Ding Nan trembled all over and shouted hysterically, "But why is it that poor people like me always die, while rich people like you live? Why was that? Who can tell me why?" Zhou Qin said angrily, "Is poverty the reason for your madness? Li Yundong is much poorer than you. Have you ever seen him go crazy? Ding Nan, put down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha immediately. Hurry up and turn back." It's not too late. Don't wait until your hands are stained with blood. It will be too late to turn back. Tears fell from Ding Nan's eyes, but she giggled. Her voice was strange and creepy. She cried and laughed at the same time and said, "It's too late. Ever since you became Li Yundong's disciple and I became Zheng Yuan's disciple, everything has been too late. Can you turn back time and start over? No, no matter how powerful you are, you can't." As she said this, she dragged Alba back step by step. Her eyes gradually became cold, and she warned Zhou Qin, "If you come any closer, I will kill her. However, you must remember that it was you who forced her to die." Zhou Qin knew that if she went forward and grabbed Alba by force, she would definitely die. Although she sometimes had an iron-blooded and ruthless side, she was not born cold-blooded. Otherwise, she would not have let Ding Nan go when she betrayed her. Zhou Qin gritted her teeth and watched helplessly as Alba was dragged into the deep night by Ding Nan. At this time, Chris, who had been trapped in the tree, screamed in despair, "No! Let her go!" But as soon as Chris's voice fell, a golden light flashed like lightning in the thick night, stabbing toward Chris. Zhou Qin immediately shook her wrist and hit the golden light. However, the golden light seemed to have expected Zhou Qin's reaction. It instantly turned, bypassed the Vulcan's whip, and went straight through the pine that Chris was holding. The pine had been dragged loosely by John and Chris and was about to break at any time. Now that it was penetrated, it suddenly broke with a crack. Chrissy let out a scream, and her body instantly fell. Zhou Qin was quick to react. With a shake of the Vulcan's whip, the whip wrapped around Chris's waist. She glanced at a protruding boulder not far away and said to Chris, "Go grab that stone." Chris only felt her body lighten as she flew to the front of the boulder. She immediately hugged the boulder with both hands and finally rolled back from the jaws of death, surviving. After Zhou Qin saved Chris, she roared angrily, "Ding Nan, can't you let these innocent people go?" Ding Nan laughed out loud and said, "Then just give up and let me kill you." Zhou Qin gritted her teeth and sneered. "In your dreams." Ding Nan snorted and said, "Then don't blame me for being rude." As she spoke, she hid in the dark and controlled the threaded hairpin of soul traversal to attack Zhou Qin. Because Zhou Qin had come out in a hurry, she hadn't brought Zai, a powerful magical weapon that was obviously a controlled knife, with her. She didn't have a 7-treasure bag like Li Yundong, so she only brought the Vulcan's whip with her. At this time, dealing with the attack of the threaded hairpin of soul traversal, although it was more than enough to protect herself, Ding Nan would attack Chris, who was trapped on the boulder, from time to time. This time, Zhou Qin no longer had the strength to fight back. The more she fought, the more difficult it was for her, and the angrier she became. Although Zhou Qin was angry, she was quickly thinking of countermeasures. Just as she was thinking, she suddenly heard a loud rumbling sound coming from Tiandu Peak not far away, as if countless dragons and tigers were roaring in unison. A colorful glow rose into the sky, and the light went straight to the sky, its power piercing through the 9 heavens. This abnormality immediately attracted Zhou Qin and Ding Nan's attention. They had never seen such a magical scene before, and for a moment, they were both dumbfounded. For a moment, Chris also forgot her dangerous situation and the tragedy that had befallen John and Alba. She raised her head and looked at the colorful and magnificent beam of light that pierced through the sky from Tiandu Peak. For a moment, her eyes were a little dazed. In Chris's heart, a hesitant voice kept recalling, "Is this what you want to pursue? Is this the power you want to pursue? What can it bring you? How much are you going to pay for it? Everything?" Just as Chris was staring at the colorful beam of light in a daze, Ding Nan, who was hiding in the night, suddenly felt a powerful aura pounce on her in the blink of an eye. She was shocked and subconsciously wanted to fight back, but she heard a familiar voice scolding her, "How dare you? Don't you recognize me?" Ding Nan turned her head and saw Zheng Yuan standing beside her, looking in the direction of Tiandu Peak with sparkling eyes. Ding Nan immediately withdrew her hand. She smiled embarrassedly and let go of Alba's throat. She asked, "Master, where are Zi Yuan and the others?" Zheng Yuan's face darkened, and he said in a cold voice, "Those two bitches are playing guerrilla warfare with me. Humph, I don't care about them. I don't think they dare to get close." As he said this, he glanced at Alba, who had already been paralyzed with fear, and asked coldly, "Who is she?" Ding Nan snorted and said, "An exchange student at Tiannan University. She can also be considered Li Yundong's classmate." "Classmate?" Zheng Yuan narrowed his eyes and smiled sinisterly. "Well, take her as a hostage." Ding Nan hesitated for a moment before saying, "But master, she doesn't seem to have anything to do with Li Yundong." Zheng Yuan's mind was not on this at this time. He said impatiently, "Who told you to get a few valuable hostages? It's better to have someone in your hands than nothing. Besides, even if there are no hostages, I have the Hell Wuzhang enchanting jade in my hand. Do you think I won't be able to get the Diyuan Jin Dan?" Hearing Zheng Yuan's unkind tone, Ding Nan sneered in her heart. "This old man can't catch Zi Yuan and Su Chan, so he's taking it out on me?" Although Ding Nan thought this in her heart, she changed the topic. "Master, what's going on with the colorful beam of light just now?" Zheng Yuan's eyes shone brightly as he looked at Tiandu Peak. There was uncontrollable enthusiasm and excitement in his voice as he said, "The Diyuan Jin Dan, the Diyuan Jin Dan has appeared." Ding Nan was shocked. "So fast?" Zheng Yuan stared straight at the colorful beam of light and said, "Do you think it will take dozens of days?" "Humph, come on, let's go." As soon as he finished speaking, countless cyan lights flashed in the sky, as if countless cultivators had appeared in the blink of an eye and were madly rushing toward Tiandu Peak. Zheng Yuan laughed and said, "They're coming, they're all coming. My good disciple, we can't fall behind. Let's go." As he said this, he took Ding Nan's hand, and Ding Nan grabbed Alba. The three of them disappeared in a flash. After Su Chan and Zi Yuan saw that Zheng Yuan had left, they dared to show up and approach Zhou Qin. As soon as Zhou Qin saw the two of them, she was shocked and asked, "Are you all right? What was that light just now?" Zi Yuan said with a stern expression, "The Diyuan Jin Dan has appeared. I didn't expect it to be so fast." Su Chan saw cyan lights flashing around her and cultivators flying toward Tiandu Peak one after another. She said anxiously, "Let's go." "What are you waiting for?" Zhou Qin pointed to Chris, who was trapped on the boulder, and said, "What about her? Are we going to take her with us?" Zi Yuan immediately frowned and said, "No, there will be a fierce battle on Tiandu Peak later. It will be extremely tragic. It will be a disaster rather than a blessing to take someone like her who has no ability to protect herself with us. It's better to let her stay on the ropeway first. At least it's safe here. We'll come back to find her later, okay?" Zhou Qin thought for a moment, then quickly flashed in front of Chris and hugged her. Then, she jumped onto the ropeway that had not been cut off by Ding Nan and said, "Chris, we're going to Tiandu Peak to help Li Yundong. Don't move around here. We'll come back to find you later. Okay?" At this time, Chris seemed to be stunned. She stared at Zhou Qin without saying a word. Zhou Qin was burning with anxiety at this time. Seeing that Chris didn't speak, she thought that she had agreed, so with the help of Su Chan and Zi Yuan, they flew together. At this time, Chris saw the three of them fly away. The ropeway of Mount Huangshan, which had been full of murderous intent just a moment ago, had become extremely quiet. The night wind blew, and the cliff was dense. The air around the ropeway was cold, and there was a penetrating chill in the air. Chris stared at the colorful beam of light in the direction of Tiandu Peak. Suddenly, what Hardadef had said to her kept echoing in her mind, "Chris, if you have the chance, you must tell me, what kind of feeling cultivation is." These words kept echoing in Chris's mind, and her eyes gradually bloomed with a stubborn and persistent gaze. Suddenly, Chris fiercely jumped up and madly ran in the direction of Sky Capital Peak. Chapter 572. The alchemy room chosen by Wang Jinyuan could be said to be one of the 3 best places in the Fengshui treasure land. It was filled with treasures and the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. The huge grotto was surrounded by formations and runes to prevent people from breaking in through the yin spirit or yang spirit. In the center of the stone room was a huge yin-yang 8 trigrams formation. The center of the formation was hollowed out, and below it was a huge abyss, which was the medicine pool. "Let's go." 7 K.O.M. Flames were boiling in the medicine pool, and above the flames was a 3-legged copper tripod. It was the magical item of Sun Simiao, the famous medicine king of the Tang dynasty, the medicine king tripod. The top of the medicine king tripod was facing a hollowed-out cave skylight, which reflected the meaning of illuminating the 9 heavens and guiding the 9 earths. The medicine king tripod was about half a meter in diameter, black all over, and engraved with ancient characters and totems. Underneath the medicine king tripod, various kinds of faint mist constantly drifted up from the medicine pool at the bottom of the medicine king tripod, then drilled into the bottom of the medicine king tripod, and slowly gathered in the furnace of the medicine king tripod. These various kinds of mist rolled and twisted in it, colorful, like colorful beads shining in all directions. Wang Jinyuan saw the right time and threw the 1,000-year-old snow lotus in his hand into the medicine pool. Then, he quickly pinched a few fingers, shouted, and pointed at the medicine pool. Suddenly, there was a rumbling sound in the medicine pool, and a towering flame burst into the sky. The medicine king tripod was roasted by this raging fire. Suddenly, a cyan and white color converged in the 6-colored brilliance, turning into a 7-colored brilliance. This brilliance lingered and twisted, constantly changing shape. After an unknown amount of time, the roars of dragons and tigers suddenly burst forth from the medicinal pool, causing the entire Sky Capital Peak to tremble. The 7-colored brilliance that was originally only shining brightly in the stone chamber soared into the sky, transforming into an intense pillar of light. Following the appearance of this pillar of light, the stone chamber was immediately filled with a strange medicinal fragrance. It was exceptionally beautiful, causing one's mind to be intoxicated. Li Yunyang saw the beam of light rush up along the skylight at the top of the grotto, as if it could penetrate the 9th heaven. He was shocked and asked, "What's going on?" Wang Jinyuan said with a fanatical look in his eyes, "It's done. The Diyuan Jindan has been refined." Li Yundong hadn't expected that the refining of the Diyuan Jindan would be so fast and that the movement would be so big. He asked in surprise, "So fast?" Wang Jinyuan laughed ecstatically and said, "Of course, I've been collecting medicinal materials for more than 10 years for this day. Everything was already prepared, and all that was left was the east wind. As long as I get the 1,000-year-old snow lotus, I can immediately refine the Diyuan Jindan." Li Yunyang widened his eyes and looked at the colorful pillar of light. He saw 4 thumb-sized colorful pills floating in the air gradually appear in the colorful pillar of light. These 3 pills were crystal clear and emitted waves of gentle 7-colored light, illuminating the stone chamber with bursts of colorful light. Wang Jinyuan was even more ecstatic and said, "4 pills in 1 furnace, ha ha ha. Master, did you see that? I refined the legendary 4 pills in 1 cauldron." Even the medicine king Sun Simiao only managed to concoct 5 pills a batch. As soon as he finished speaking, a figure suddenly rushed in from the round hole of the skylight on the top of the alchemy room, which was less than the size of a football. At first, the figure was extremely long, like a rolling pin, but soon after it got into the stone room, it immediately swelled up and quickly turned into a masked man in black. The man in black appeared in the blink of an eye and stretched out his hand to grab the 4 Diyuan Jindan floating in the air. Li Yundong and Wang Zhenyuan hadn't expected that someone would come in from this place. They were shocked and shouted in unison, "Stop! You're courting death." Li Yundong's mind stirred. Before his body moved at all, a bolt of lightning pounced on the man in black in the blink of an eye. The Liuhe sword made a lightning strike. The man in black dared to snatch food from the tiger's mouth at this time. Obviously, his cultivation was also extremely high. Without looking at it, he stretched out his hand and firmly clamped the Liuhe sword with 2 fingers. However, the Liuhe sword was a psychic magical weapon. As soon as it was clamped, it began to struggle violently, like a monster trapped in a cage. The man in black was clamping the Liuhe sword with one hand and grabbing the Dun Jindan with the other. But at this time, Wang Zhenyuan's powerful magical weapon, Chu Qi, also flew out in an instant and attacked the man in black. Seeing that the Chu Qi was about to hit his chest in the blink of an eye, the black-clothed man gritted his teeth and still used his hand to grab the Dun Jindan. With a snap, his 5 fingers firmly grabbed the 4 Dun Jindan into his palm. As soon as the man in black grabbed the Dun Jindan, the colorful brilliance in the stone room disappeared in an instant, and the originally dazzling stone room became abnormally dim. Although the man in black had seized the Dun Jindan in an instant, he was greedy and used his physical body to block the magical weapon. Suddenly, Wang Zhenyuan's Chu Qi hit his chest with a puff. The man in black suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, and his yang spirit body was blasted out of his body. Once a person's soul was lost, his body would be ownerless. Not to mention activating his Jinqi and spiritual energy, he couldn't even exert his strength like an ordinary person. The Liuhe sword, which had been clamped by him, suddenly became like a tiger out of its cage. With a spin of the blade, the man's fingers were instantly broken. Then, with a flash of lightning, the man's arm, which was holding the Dun Jindan, was cut off at the wrist. The Liuhe sword was merciless. Soon, it flashed again and pierced through the man's heart. As soon as the man in black's broken wrist fell, his fingers involuntarily loosened. The Dun Jindan saw the light of day again and was still floating in the air. The stone room was once again filled with colorful brilliance. The man in black's body was instantly crippled. His young spirit roared angrily and was about to pounce on the Dun Jindan again when he suddenly heard a rumbling mantra reciting in his ears, Fu Ri Luo Jianan. Bang! In an instant, a shining golden Vajra realm freedom seal hit his young spirit firmly. The man in black didn't even have time to groan. In the blink of an eye, his young spirit was smashed into pieces and turned into countless thin cyan rays of light. These rays of light didn't dare to stay any longer and quickly flew toward the skylight exit of the alchemy room. Wang Zhenyuan grinned grimly. "You can come and go as you please." Humph. He spat out a stream of purple qi from his nostrils and quickly pinched the incantation with both hands to point at the medicine pool. Suddenly, a colorful flame boiled in the medicine pool and rushed toward the rays of light. At the same time, Li Yundong took out the burning thumb pot and flicked his finger. With a ding, ripples spread out from the burning thumb pot, pulling back the escaping yang spirit clones one by one. Li Yundong and Wang Zhenyuan attacked together. The poor yang spirit master had nowhere to run. In the blink of an eye, he was either swallowed up by the flames in the medicine pool or absorbed most of his spiritual qi and jinqi by Li Yundong's burning thumb pot. His body and soul were completely destroyed. Although Li Yundong and Wang Zhenyuan had killed the cultivator who had dared to steal the treasure in front of them, they didn't feel happy about fighting side by side. Instead, they looked at each other with vigilance and hostility. Wang Zhenyuan said angrily, "Jinrenli, it's not like I won't give you the Dun Jindan. Why do you have to do this?" Li Yundong also said angrily, "Why are you blaming me? Didn't you say that this place is very safe and hidden? Why would someone suddenly try to steal the elixir?" Wang Zhenyuan saw that Li Yundong was full of indignation and didn't seem to be lying. He couldn't help but be stunned and said in a deep voice, "Zhenrenli, if I wanted to play tricks, would I have used such a low-level method?" Li Yundong stared at Wang Zhenyuan like lightning. After a while, he said slowly, "Didn't you leak the news?" Wang Zhenyuan laughed angrily and said, "I suspected that you were the one who leaked the news. I've been working hard for more than 10 years for this day. Do you think I'm stupid and deliberately let someone steal my Diyuan Jindan?" Li Yundong frowned. "Then what's going on?" As soon as Wang Zhenyuan opened his mouth and was about to speak, he suddenly saw another person fly in from the skylight. Li Yundong and Wang Zhenyuan were furious at the same time, and their powerful magical weapons immediately rushed toward this person. This man's cultivation was obviously not as high as that of the previous black-clothed man. In the blink of an eye, he was killed by their powerful magical weapons and fell to the ground without saying a word. His yang spirit was also quickly strangled by Li Yunyang and Wang Zhenyuan. After Li Yundong destroyed the man's yang spirit, his expression changed and he said, "It might be a coincidence if it's one, but what about two?" As soon as he finished speaking, he saw another figure looking out of the skylight and disappearing in a flash. Li Yundong was furious. With a thought in his mind, the Liuhe sword swept out like lightning and stabbed toward the man with a puff. The man who was looking out of the skylight had no time to dodge. With a scream, he fell down. His painful cry was clearly heard from outside the alchemy room. "It's inside. The Diyuan Jindan is inside." As soon as this person finished shouting, the alchemy room immediately rumbled, as if countless Dharma spells and Dharma treasures were fiercely bombarding it. Li Yundong felt as if the stone room he was in had been hit by a terrible bombardment. Countless cannonballs poured down, shaking heaven and earth, causing the gravel and dust in the stone room to fall continuously. Wang Zhenyuan's face was livid. He gritted his teeth and said, "What the hell is going on? Why are there so many people? Zhongqingsong, do you dare to betray me?" Li Yundong's face was as dark as water. He quickly looked around, as if he wanted to see how long the stone room could last under the bombardment of magical items and magic. Wang Zhenyuan noticed Li Yundong's actions. He snorted coldly and said proudly, "Zhenrenli, there's no need to look. They won't be able to break in. I've set up more than a dozen magic formations here. Unless a lightning retribution master attacks, they won't be able to break in for a while." As he spoke, Wang Zhenyuan raised his head coldly and looked at the skylight. He said coldly, "When I came in, I had already sealed the entrance. If they want to come in, they can only come from here." Li Yundong snorted. "One man can hold the pass against 10,000 enemies. If one comes, I'll kill one. If two come, I'll kill both." Wang Zhenyuan sneered and said, "That's true, but how many can we kill? What if they just surround us? Are we going to stay here forever? Besides, there is no fortress in the world that can't be broken." Li Yundong's face darkened. "Then what do you think we should do?" Wang Zhenyuan looked at Li Yundong, then suddenly smiled and said, "Zhenrenli, I have an idea." Li Yundong asked, "What is it?" Wang Zhenyuan smiled slightly and said, "That is, the cicada takes off its shell." As he spoke, he suddenly waved the horsetail whisk in his hand, and the tail of the whisk wrapped around a Diyuan Jindan floating in the air. Then, he quickly turned into a green light and fled toward the skylight. As soon as Wang Zhenyuan escaped, Li Yundong immediately went out of his body with his yang spirit and followed him out of the skylight. As soon as Wang Zhenyuan escaped into the air, he gritted his teeth and shouted at Li Yundong with deep hatred, "Li Yundong, there are still 3 Diyuan Jindans down there. Don't you think it's enough? Why won't you let me go?" After that, he instantly turned into a green light and fled to the horizon. Li Yundong was shocked and angry. He knew that Wang Zhenyuan was trying to get rid of him, but he couldn't chase after Wang Zhenyuan, because there were indeed 3 Diyuan Jindans in the alchemy room under his feet. If he chased after him, he would really lose everything. Even the colorful brilliance of the Diyuan Jindans was still shining brightly. Other cultivators who had come to rob the panaceas would not believe it. Wang Zhenyuan is good. How bold. There were 4 Diyuan Jindans, but she only took 1. Li Yundong's heart was filled with rage and shock. If Wang Zhenyuan had taken the Diyuan Jindans as well, he would have chased him to the ends of the earth, even if it meant risking his life. If he had taken 3, the brilliance in the stone room would have been greatly reduced, and the other cultivators would naturally chase after the person who had more panaceas. But Wang Zhenyuan had only taken 1. He didn't even take 2. It was as if he was afraid that his plan to lead the trouble to Li Yundong would fail, that he could not escape, and that Li Yundong would not be attacked by everyone. This man is ruthless. He is an enemy, not a friend. I can't let him go. Li Yundong was extremely angry. Just as he was about to flick the burning thumb pot, countless powerful magical weapons flew over from all directions in the night. These magical weapons of various colors were like stormy waves, forming a huge torrent, smashing toward him. He hadn't slept well last night, so he had a splitting headache. He would make up for it tomorrow morning. Chapter 573. Li Yunyang looked around quickly and saw that most of the cultivators around were hiding in the night. They didn't show their figures, but attacked from a distance with their powerful magical weapons. Obviously, they didn't want to reveal their true identities, in case they really grabbed the Diyuan Jindan and attracted the attention of others. Watch net. 7 KOM. In the blink of an eye, the Tiandu peak of Mount Huangshan was boiling under the night sky. For a time, all kinds of powerful magical weapons were falling like stars in the sky. Even though Li Yunyang was strong, he couldn't stop so many powerful magical weapons from smashing toward him. With a thought, he retracted his yang spirit and let the powerful magical weapons around him hit nothing. Suddenly, he heard a familiar voice shouting outside, "Yundong, be careful." Li Yundong was shocked. "Chaner? Why is she here?" "Nonsense, truly nonsense." Soon, Su Chan screamed, "Ouch! Don't hit me." Her voice faded into the distance in an instant, as if she had fled far away in an instant. Some cultivators shouted, "Catch them. Let's see if Li Yundong will hand over the Diyuan Jindan." Li Yunyang was furious. Immediately, his yang spirit came out of his body again and turned into the Dharmakaya of Wisdom King with 3 heads and 6 arms. He made a Mahamudra in the direction of the voice. With a bang, the cultivator who said he wanted to catch Su Chan suddenly screamed and stopped moving. At this time, Zhou Qin quickly jumped to the top of the alchemy room and stood next to Li Yundong's yang spirit. She asked nervously, "Master, are you okay?" Li Yundong glared at her angrily. "Why are you here? Didn't I tell you to stay at home?" Zhou Qin was stunned when she heard this. Just as she was about to speak, Zi Yuan also flew to their side and said quickly, "Don't pursue this matter at this time. It's my fault. Hurry up and think of a way to deal with the matter at hand." While the 3 of them were talking, many cultivators around them controlled their magic treasures and magic to attack Li Yundong. At this time, Li Yundong no longer dodged. He held the reincarnation 9 seals in his hand and kept waving his 6 arms like a 1,000-armed Buddha. In an instant, he made countless big handprints in front of him, blocking the attacks of the powerful magical weapons and magic spells around him one after another. A cultivator hiding in the darkness shouted, "Li Yundong, hurry up and hand over the Diyuan Jindan. Otherwise, with so many of us here, we will exhaust you to death." Li Yundong snorted angrily. "You want to bully me with numbers? All right, bring it on." After saying that, he sent another palm strike towards the person who spoke. But it was obvious that this person had learned from the previous mistake. After saying that, he immediately changed his position. After Li Yunyang's golden Mahamudra shot out, it was like a stone sinking into the sea, without any reaction. But very quickly, the magical weapons and spells from the surroundings once again attacked like a stormy sea. In the dark night, the wind blew violently, fireballs danced in the air, and the flying swords of various sects were like lightning, running amok. For a moment, all kinds of strange lights shone brightly on Sky Capital Peak, brightly illuminating the surroundings. Facing the siege of everyone, Li Yundong did not panic. He pinched the Mahamudra with 2 hands, and the other 4 quickly pinched the reincarnation 9 seals to resist the tide-like attack. After he finished reciting the mantra, he shouted loudly, and an immovable Vajra Samadhi Mahamudra, which could not be moved by the wind, suddenly appeared in front of him. With a bang, a Vajra Arhat suddenly appeared around him. These Vajra Arhats were all shining with golden light. They were either sitting cross-legged or standing with their palms together. They were chanting Sanskrit scriptures, like a golden city wall, firmly wrapping Li Yundong and the others in it. The surrounding magical weapons and powerful magical weapons hit it, creating waves of golden ripples, but they were unable to break through the golden city wall. From a distance, one could see that all kinds of meteors on Tiandu Peak were rushing toward a golden ball of light. For a moment, the sky and earth were shaking, and rumbling sounds were heard. Zhou Qin's eyes widened as she looked at the scene in front of her. She asked in surprise, "Master, what kind of magic is this?" Zi Yuan was experienced and knowledgeable. She quickly said, "Is this the Mahamudra? It's impossible. How could it be so powerful?" Li Yundong said in a deep voice, "This is the real mantra Mahamudra. Now is not the time to talk about this. Hurry up and leave with the Dun Jin Dan. I'll hold them off." Zi Yuan immediately rejected him and said flatly, "No. As soon as we leave with the Dun Jin Dan, they will immediately turn around and chase after us. Didn't you see that none of these cultivators dared to reveal their identities? How do you know which cultivators are still hiding in the dark and haven't made a move?" Li Yundong gritted his teeth and said, "Then what should we do?" Zi Yuan thought for a moment and said, "How many Dun Jindans are left?" As Li Yundong performed the Mahamudra, he said, "Wan Zhenyuan refined 4 elixirs in 1 furnace. He took 1 for himself, so there are still 3 left." Zi Yuan was shocked. 4 elixirs in 1 furnace? Wan Zhenyuan is amazing. Li Yundong gritted his teeth and said, "He's more than amazing. He simply won't stop until I'm dead. He threw 3 Dun Jindans to me. Humph, how generous." Zhou Qin said angrily, "This guy is sinister and vicious. Isn't he harming others by throwing this hot potato to you at this time? Master, what should we do? Should we throw this hot potato to someone else?" Zi Yuan was shocked and immediately said, "No." Li Yundong also laughed angrily and said, "What are you talking about? Since he dares to throw it away, I dare to take it. I'd like to see who can snatch this Dun Jin Dan from me." Zhou Qin said nervously, "But master, the enemy is in the dark while we are out in the open. We can't advance or retreat, and we don't know how many enemies there are. What should we do?" As she spoke, the magic weapons around her bombarded the golden walls made of Vajra Arhats one after another like a storm. It seemed that the attacks would never stop. The Vajra Arhats, which were originally shining with golden light, slowly dimmed, and some places were even shattered by the bombardment. Some cultivators were overjoyed and shouted, "He can't hold on any longer. Let's work harder." Li Yundong gritted his teeth and shouted loudly. After making the fixed fundamental seal, he quickly made another Akuo seal with his hands and said, "Ah! Ji Sui Fu Luo Luo Shi." Ah! This roar suddenly shook the sky. In an instant, a shining golden Buddha appeared above Li Yundong's head. This Buddha was sitting on the flame lotus throne, with 7 colorful halos around his back. He crossed his hands, and his 2 thumbs were stretched out vertically. The middle section of his 2 index fingers was straight, and he used his 2 index fingers to support his thumbs. In the palm of his hand, a soft light kept gushing out. As soon as the Vajra arhats around him came into contact with this light, they immediately shone with golden light again. For a moment, the shaky golden city wall immediately became as solid as gold, and it was even more stable than before. For a moment, the chanting of these Vajra arhats was loud, as if thousands of Buddhas were paying homage. The chanting sound lingered on Tiandu Peak, even louder than the sound of magic and the explosion of magic weapons. After Li Yundong stabilized his position with one move, he looked at the powerful magical weapons that were constantly attacking him and said with an angry smile, "Do you think I don't have any powerful magical weapons?" Lioha. As soon as he finished speaking, the Lioha flashed behind him and flew into the air. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a speck of starlight. But after a while, this speck of starlight turned into 2, 3, and countless specks of starlight. When they fell again, it was an overwhelming sword rain. The Lioha instantly split into countless sharp swords in the air, attacking the cultivators hiding in the darkness around him. At that time, Yen Fong had relied on the Lioha to fight against many people alone. On Mount Gazao, she had beaten everyone until they had no way to fight back. At this time, in the hands of Li Yundong, whose cultivation was higher, the power of the Lioha was even greater. When the surrounding cultivators saw the Lioha coming at them, they were all shocked. None of them had expected that Li Yundong would be able to fight back in the face of the siege of so many people alone. For a moment, everyone was caught off guard and was beaten to a pulp. Ding Nan was dumbfounded. She stammered, "Master, what kind of magic is this? Li Yundong is too powerful, isn't he?" Zheng Yuan's eyes shone brightly. He looked at Li Yundong with great vigilance and said, "This is the mantra Mahamudras Akuta Mudra. Don't you think the handprint of this Amateus Buddha looks like a lotus? The power of this handprint lies in its ability to increase the mighty Buddha nature. Damn it, this guy has become stronger again. If he really gets these 3 Dun Jindans, coupled with the Lioha in his hand, he will really be able to do whatever he wants in the cultivation world. No, we must stop him." Ding Nan's eyes were still fixed on the majestic Li Yunyang. She subconsciously asked, "How can we stop him?" Zheng Yuan's eyes flickered. He glanced at Alba and suddenly laughed grimly. He said to Ding Nan, "Go, take her out and exchange her for a Dun Jindan. Let's see how Li Yundong will react." Ding Nan was shocked. "Me? Here? Nonsense, are you deaf?" Zheng Yuan stared at Li Yundong, as if he wanted to find his flaws from his every movement and expression. However, although Li Yundong was being besieged at this time, he was relying on his powerful Zhenqi and powerful mantra Mahamudra Kung Fu to fight against many people without falling into a disadvantageous position. Ding Nan was not a fool. She naturally knew that if anyone stood up at this time, they would definitely become the target of Li Yundong's hatred. Even if Li Yundong gave in and she got the Dun Jindan, she would immediately become another target of the cultivators in the world. This was definitely a job that required a knife to cut one's head out and a knife to cut one's head in. Ding Nan cursed in her heart, but she said with a pleading face, "Master, it's not good now, is it? What if?" But before she could finish speaking, Zheng Yuan suddenly turned his head and stared at her with a terrifying and gloomy look. He said coldly, "Do you want to die? Didn't you hear what I said?" Ding Nan was frightened by Zheng Yuan's expression at this time. She suddenly realized that in the face of the great temptation of the Dun Jindan, Zheng Yuan could no longer maintain his hypocrisy and calmness. At this time, this cold, cruel, ruthless, and ferocious Zheng Yuan was his true face. Ding Nan's heart was cold. She suppressed the raging anger and shock in her heart, forced a smile at Zheng Yuan, and then dragged Alba to the field. Ding Nan stood under the door of the immortal cave and looked up at Li Yundong, who was majestic in the alchemy room. She looked at Zhou Qin, who was close to Li Yundong, and cried in her heart, "Why me? Why is it always me? Why is she always able to stand on top of me in all her glory? Why is this happening?" Zheng Yuan saw Ding Nan standing not far away and looking at Li Yundong in a daze. He lowered his voice impatiently and roared at Ding Nan, "Why are you in a daze?" Ding Nan's body trembled. She gritted her teeth, raised her head, and shouted at Li Yundong, "Li Yundong! Stop right now. Otherwise, I'll kill her." Chapter 574. Li Yundong looked down and saw a familiar figure standing below. She was dressed in fashionable and sexy clothes, which was incompatible with the situation in front of him. As soon as Li Yundong saw this person's appearance, he was shocked. "Ding Nan? Why are you here? Have you reached the Zhuji phase?" But soon, Li Yundong saw a woman with brown and blue eyes in Ding Nan's hand. It was Alba, who had been clamoring with Chris and the others to worship him as her master. Li Yundong was shocked again. How could she be here? "Ding Nan, are you crazy? Let her go." Ding Nan was trembling all over. What she was most afraid of was being hated by Li Yundong, and what she was most afraid of being looked down upon by him. However, in front of her, Li Yundong's shocked and angry eyes were like sharp knives, cutting her heart one by one. "Go to the internet." Ding Nan gritted her teeth and said in a trembling voice, "Li Yundong, if you don't want her to die, hand over the Dun Jin Dan." Li Yundong seemed to be unable to believe his eyes. He said in shock, "Ding Nan. Have you been with Zheng Yuan for too long that you've lost your humanity? How could you take an innocent person as a hostage? Are you still the Ding Nan I know?" Ding Nan suddenly felt as if a sharp knife had pierced her chest, and her whole body trembled uncontrollably. She giggled while crying and said, "Yes, I'm no longer the Ding Nan you know. Hurry up and make a choice. Whether this person lives or dies is up to you." Although Alba didn't understand Chinese, she was not a fool. Seeing this situation, she could guess what was going on. She shouted at Li Yundong in English in horror, "Help, master, help me." Alba was also a rare beauty. She was tall and sexy and had a strong South American style. At this time, her pleading really softened the hearts of those who heard it. Many cultivators turned their faces away and couldn't bear to look at her anymore. There was a hint of sympathy in Li Yundong's eyes. He shook his head secretly and said to Ding Nan in a cold voice, "Ding Nan, you have already fallen into the devil's path. Moreover, if this Dun Jin Dan is given to you, it will definitely fall into Zheng Yuan's hands." Zheng Yuan could be said to be a man with a human face but a beast's heart. If the Dun Jin Dan fell into his hands, more innocent people would definitely die. As the saying goes, doing good breeds great evil. In order to save Alba, I let more innocent people die in the hands of Zheng Yuan. This is not a good deed, but an accomplice to a villain, a great evil in the world. Li Yundong's eyes gradually turned cold, and he said in a cold voice, "But I want to tell you, if you dare to kill her, from now on, you will no longer be my friend, my classmate, but my enemy. When I see you again, I will no longer be lenient and will definitely enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. Anyone who dares to harm the people around me, I will definitely chase them to the ends of the earth. No matter how vast the sky is, there is no place for them to hide. No matter how vast the earth is, there is no place for them to hide." Li Yundong's words were resolute and murderous, which made people's hair stand on end. For a moment, Tiandu Peak was quiet. Some people looked at Ding Nan and Li Yundong quietly, watching the changes in the situation on the field. Some people were shocked by Li Yundong's words and even began to retreat. Ding Nan was no exception. She was shocked by Li Yundong's amazing momentum. She subconsciously took a step back and loosened her grip on Alba's throat a little. As soon as Ding Nan loosened her grip, Alba immediately noticed it and began to struggle frantically. Ding Nan was absent-minded and accidentally let Alba escape. She ran 2 steps forward. Zheng Yuan, who was hiding in the dark, saw that Ding Nan had no reaction. He was furious and waved the horsetail whisk in his hand. Suddenly, the whisk lashed out like a whip and grabbed Alba back. Only then did Ding Nan react. She quickly rushed back to Zheng Yuan's side, forced a smile, and said, "Master, Li Yundong doesn't fall for this. What should we do?" Zheng Yuan grinned hideously and said, "Then kill her. It's good to disturb Li Yundong's Taoist heart." After saying that, Zheng Yuan raised his hand and was about to slap the top of Alba's head. Alba suddenly let out a horrified scream. Ding Nan trembled all over. She quickly stopped Zheng Yuan and said, "Master, don't." Zheng Yuan turned his face with cold eyes and looked at Ding Nan suspiciously. He said word by word in a cold voice, "Are you the Pinger I know?" Ding Nan's heart tightened. She forced a smile and said, "Master, what are you talking about? If I'm not Pinger, who am I?" Zheng Yuan's eyes were like lightning as he stared at Ding Nan's face, as if he wanted to see through her heart at a glance. "The Pinger I know is not such a wishy-washy person. It's not a big deal to kill such a nobody, let alone a foreigner." "Humph, how dare you speak up for her?" Ding Nan broke out in a cold sweat. She thought quickly and said, "Master, you have always taught me to think about the way out before entering the city gate. What if Li Yundong refuses to let us go after we snatch the Diyuan Jindan? Or, if we don't get it and fall into an extremely disadvantageous situation, Li Yundong will come to make trouble for us again. At that time, having a shield is better than not having one, right?" Zheng Yuan stared at Ding Nan for a long time until she almost couldn't stand still. Then he snorted, withdrew his palm, and said coldly, "Then I'll let this foreigner live a little longer." After that, he stood with his hands behind his back and looked at Li Yundong gloomily. He said in a low voice, "This guy is relying on his high cultivation to guard this place. It's really tricky. This alchemy room has been attacked for a long time, but it hasn't been taken down for a long time. If the noise is really too big and attracts the attention of the world, what should we do?" While he was talking, Li Yundong was also secretly worried above the alchemy room. Although he had shocked Ding Nan with an extremely tough attitude just now, and for a moment, all the cultivators around had stopped attacking together, Tiandu Peak fell into a very short silence. Li Yundong looked around and saw that in the thick night, he could vaguely see a few figures flashing, and more people were hiding in the shadows, as if they were waiting for the best opportunity to give Li Yundong a stronger blow. However, he, Zi Yuan, and Zhou Qin were standing above the alchemy room, shrouded in colorful light. They were so clear that they were like stars under the ceiling lights on a stage, showing every detail. This kind of feeling really made Li Yundong extremely unhappy. Zhou Qin saw Li Yundong frown and thought that he was worried that Alba would be taken hostage. She secretly regretted it. If she hadn't been willful, such a tragedy wouldn't have happened. She was sad, so she said in a low voice, "Master, I want to apologize to you." Li Yundong was stunned. "What's wrong?" Zhou Qin hesitated for a moment. She bit her lip and was about to speak softly, but Li Yundong raised his hand and stopped her. Li Yundong said, "If you have anything to say, go back and think about how to get out of this damn place first. Now we have been set up by that bastard Wang Yuan, and we can't stop halfway." Zi Yuan smiled bitterly and said, 3 Yuan Jindans. He's really willing to spend a lot of money. I don't even dare to think about it. It's the first time I've heard of such a big hot potato. My heart is scalded to death. Li Yundong snorted coldly and said, if you take something in advance, you must give it in advance. 1 Dun Jindan is enough for a cultivator to break through the bottleneck. Why does he need so many? Unless he wants to mass-produce golden immortal masters. Seeing that Li Yundong didn't care about her mistakes for the time being, Zhou Qin felt a little relieved. She smiled and comforted him, Master, let's take these 3 Dun Jindans now and let these guys stare at us. Li Yundong smiled and said, there are 4 of us, and there are 3 Dun Jindans here. How should we divide them? Zhou Qin was stunned, but she quickly said, of course, Master, Zi Yuan, and Su Chan will eat them. Li Yundong was stunned. What about you? You don't want them? Zhou Qin smiled and shook her head. I just took the Renyuan Jindan. How can I take the Dun Jindan again? No matter how lucky a person is, how can he take 2 elixirs in a row? Aren't you afraid of shortening your lifespan? Li Yundong took a deep look at Zhou Qin and nodded in his heart. He changed the topic and suddenly asked, by the way, where's Chaner? I heard her voice just now. Although Zheng Yuan had the Hell Wuzhang enchanting jade in his hand, Li Yundong's Shentong just now had really made him very afraid, and his original desire to win had been greatly dispelled. He thought to himself, it's never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. This bastard is arrogant now. When I get the Dun Jindan and raise the Hell Wuzhang enchanting jade to become stronger, I will definitely torture you until you don't even look like a human or a ghost. As Zheng Yuan viciously cursed Li Yundong in his heart, he slowly retreated and hid his figure in the night. For a moment, Tiandu Peak became quiet again. Everyone seemed to be afraid of something, and they didn't even whisper to each other. The atmosphere was abnormally quiet. Li Yundong felt strange in his heart. He frowned slightly and said, do they also want to delay? No way. Zi Yuan tilted her head slightly and said curiously, there seems to be a strange sound. Li Yundong immediately asked, what sound? Zi Yuan frowned and said, listen, there seems to be a rustling sound. Li Yundong listened and was slightly stunned. It seems that there is indeed. Where is the sound coming from? Zhou Qin also listened carefully. She hesitated for a moment and suddenly said, it seems to be coming from under our feet. As soon as she finished speaking, the colorful light in the alchemy room under their feet disappeared in an instant. Li Yundong suddenly looked down and saw a figure flash in the alchemy room, grabbing the remaining 3 Dun Jindans with one hand, and then quickly diving into the medicine pool. Li Yundong suddenly became furious. How dare you make trouble under the feet of Tai Sui? You're courting death. After that, he instantly turned into a green light and chased after the figure. I still owe everyone a new update. I really can't make it up today. What a pity. He was just about to continue drilling into the ground to escape, but Li Yundong's palm just now had almost shattered all the bones in his body. For a moment, his body was so numb that he couldn't move. In the blink of an eye, Li Yundong was in front of him again. He slammed his knee into his body and hit the Lingtai acupoint on his back. The man felt his back sink and his heart turn cold. He knew that things were not looking good for him. He was definitely not going to make it. Of Li of the Xian of Qi to his hand was of Li's hand, of Li. B. Of Li, B. To Li. Li Yundong was furious. After taking the Renyuan Jindan, Li Yundong had been in a coma for a long time. If he took the Dun Jindan, he would definitely meditate for a longer time. Swallowing the Dun Jindan at this time was no different from committing suicide. But this man would rather commit suicide than fall into the hands of outsiders. It was simply harming others without benefiting himself. Li Yundong was furious. He immediately reached out and pinched the man's cheeks. With a crack, he dislocated the man's jaw. Then, he grabbed the man's arm that was holding the pill and twisted it back. The man knew that his arm would definitely be broken by Li Yundong, so he simply let Li Yundong grab him. When he bent his arm back, he struggled with his 5 fingers and flicked the 3 Dun Jindan in his hand above the medicinal pool. Suddenly, the Dun Jindan saw the light of day again, and the alchemy room was once again filled with colorful light. Li Yundong looked up and saw another person quickly getting into the alchemy room. He stared at the Dun Jindan greedily and pounced on it. Li Yundong snorted and thrust his hand down. His fingers poked into the man's spine. At the same time, lightning flashed around him, and the Liuha flew out in an instant, stabbing toward the man who was trying to snatch the treasure. The man who broke into the alchemy room saw that there was no one in the room, but the Dun Jindan was close at hand. He was ecstatic, but how could he have expected that there was a terrifying enemy hiding in the medicinal pool? As soon as the Liuha flashed, he felt a chill in his waist, followed by a sharp pain. With a scream, his fingers were less than an inch away from the Dun Jindan, and his body fell down involuntarily. However, this man was only physically injured. Soon, his yang spirit came out of his body. His hand suddenly grew an inch, and he grabbed the Dun Jindan in his hand. The man snatched the Dun Jindan. In his ecstasy, his yang spirit quickly escaped from the skylight. However, his yang spirit was not very strong, so it could not hide the dazzling light of the Dun Jindan. For a moment, the colorful light came out of his palm, attracting everyone's attention. The Dun Jindan. It's with him. Some cultivators suddenly exclaimed. Before the man could rejoice for long, he saw the other cultivators throwing their magical weapons at him. After Li Yundong chased them into the alchemy room, Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin immediately left the top of the alchemy room. This was because as soon as Li Yundong moved, the motionless fundamental seal around them would immediately disappear. If they were still standing there, they would become the target of public criticism and immediately become hedgehogs. It was a pity that the cultivator who had just snatched the Dun Jindan was targeted by countless powerful magical weapons and spells as soon as he left the alchemy room. However, he was not a top master with strong cultivation like Li Yundong. He only had time to dodge twice before he was shattered by the countless powerful magical weapons and spells. Zhou Qin and Zi Yuan saw that although the man had been shattered, the Dun Jindan was still floating in the air intact. It was even blown up by the strong wind and kept floating upward. For a moment, all the cultivators around stared at the Dun Jindan, which was emitting colorful light, with crazy greed in their eyes. All of a sudden, the surroundings fell into a terrible silence. It was like the brief moment of calm before the storm, the moment of serenity before the flash flood, the moment of silence before the eruption of a volcano. Everyone was frozen like a stone sculpture. Only the 3 Dun Jindan kept rolling in the air. The colorful light dazzled almost everyone's eyes, and their hearts were in a mess. All of a sudden, almost everyone pounced on the Dun Jindan. For a moment, there was chaos on Tiandu Peak, and powerful magical weapons were flying everywhere. Just as Zhou Qin and Zi Yuan were about to grab it, they saw that the brilliance of the Dun Jindan was covered by the dark crowd. Only a trace of colorful light shone through the gaps of the crowd in the sky. They were stunned to see these cultivators fighting for the Dun Jindan. The first one who grabbed the Dun Jindan was immediately killed mercilessly by the person who came after him. The second one who grabbed the Dun Jindan was much smarter. He grabbed it and stuffed it into his mouth. However, as soon as he stuffed it into his mouth and was about to swallow it, a sharp blade suddenly pierced through his chest. From the bottom to the top, his entire upper body was cut in two, and his head was cut in half. The Dun Jindan that had just been stuffed into his mouth once again jumped out of the top of his head, stained with blood and emitting a ferocious colorful light. Zhou Qin was stunned. She was so frightened by the terrible killing scene in front of her that she couldn't help shivering. Although she thought that she was sometimes ruthless enough, even cruel and ruthless, compared with the terrible killing in front of her, who didn't recognize their relatives and didn't distinguish good from bad, who only wanted to grab the Dun Jindan, this was the first time she felt the cruelty and indifference of the cultivation world. No one knew what kind of friendship these masked cultivators had with each other, and what kind of relationship they had with each other. But at this time, no one cared so much. Because of the sudden incident, many people had no time to prepare when they received the news. They even contacted their friends. They were afraid that they wouldn't be able to catch up with the birth of the Dun Jindan, so they immediately rushed here. However, what most people didn't expect was that Tiandu Peak, where the Dun Jindan was born, would become their grave. "Oh my God!" Zhou Qin said in a trembling voice, "Are they all crazy?" Zi Yuan also looked at the scene in front of her in shock. Suddenly, she said in a cold voice, "I finally know what Wang Zhenyuan is up to." Zhou Qin's eyes widened. She turned her head and asked, "What?" A rare look of intense anger appeared on Zi Yuan's face. She gritted her teeth and spat out word by word, 2 peaches kill 3 soldiers. 3 elixirs kill all greed. Zhou Qin trembled all over. She was not a fool, and soon understood the key point. She cried out in shock, could it be that Wang Zhenyuan wants these sects to fight with each other and form a blood feud so that he can profit from it? Zi Yuan said angrily, "It's not easy for the cultivation world to have a little sign of revival. Some people even ignore the overall situation for their own selfish interests. After this battle, our Chinese cultivation world is very likely to go back 10 years. No." As soon as Zi Yuan's voice fell, a figure flashed beside them. It was Li Yundong, who had come out of the alchemy room. His eyes flickered as he looked at the many cultivators who were fighting. "What's wrong?" Zi Yuan asked with a frown. Li Yundong shook his head slightly and said, "Although Wang Zhenyuan put me in a dangerous situation, I don't think he is the one who spread the news of the appearance of the Dun Jindan. It should be someone else." Zi Yuan was stunned. She suddenly seemed to think of something, and her eyes quickly searched for someone among the crowd. When she fixed her eyes on Zheng Yuan, her heart suddenly trembled, and her face turned pale. She said in a trembling voice, "I know. It was Zheng Yuan. No, I accidentally let him guess the news. Damn it, it was me who provoked him." Zhou Qin also quickly figured out the key point. She also said with a pale face, "No, it's my fault. If I hadn't come, then." Li Yundong's face was as dark as water. He immediately shouted, "Stop talking, now is not the time to talk about this. People are not sages. How can they not make mistakes?" Zheng Yuan actually used a vicious plan to kill 3 soldiers with 2 peaches. It's really hateful. However, the current plan is to quickly calm this turmoil. Zi Yuan calmed down and asked, "What can you do?" Just as Li Yundong was about to speak, he suddenly heard a familiar voice in the air. The voice shouted in surprise, "Yundong, I got it. I got it." Li Yundong was shocked. He looked up and saw that Su Chan had suddenly appeared in the crowd. Relying on her agility, she had actually grabbed 3 Dun Jindans. The moment she grabbed them, the cultivators around her suddenly pounced on her like crazy, like countless crazy beasts. In the next second, they were going to tear her to pieces. At this time, Chris, who had been chasing after the colorful light, finally set foot on Tiandu Peak, make up for yesterday's update. Another update. The word tuo. Chapter 576. Li Yundong saw at a glance that Su Chan had snatched the Dun Jindan from the crowd, but he was not happy at all. Instead, he only felt frightened. He couldn't imagine what he would do if something happened to Su Chan. In panic, Li Yundong hurriedly shouted, "Idiot, throw it away." Su Chan was stunned, but she quickly came to her senses. When the little girl saw the overwhelming powerful magical weapons smashing toward her, she was so scared that she trembled all over. As she ran, she shouted, "Wow, don't hit me, I don't want it." As she spoke, she casually threw the Dun Jindan away, and the 3 elixirs immediately flew out of her hand. Go to the net. 7 KOM. The 3 Dun Jindans turned in the air and fell into the hands of a cultivator like silk balls. Before the cultivator had time to be happy, the powerful magical weapons whistling toward him tore him apart in an instant. The man's yang spirit came out of his body and cursed in the air, but no one had time to pay attention to him. They all stared at the 3 Dun Jindans floating in the air with red eyes. At this time, no one was a fool. They quickly came to their senses. They knew that if anyone went to take the Dun Jindan at this time, they would be the target of public criticism and would definitely be beaten up. However, they didn't have Li Yundong's ability to stand motionless under siege, so they didn't dare to come out for a while. Tiandu Peak became deserted again. There was only blood left on the ground, and the air was filled with the pungent smell of blood. At this time, Su Chan's face was full of fear. She returned to Li Yundong's side, patted her chest, and said in shock, "Fortunately, I threw it quickly. I was scared to death." Li Yundong glared at her fiercely. "What were you thinking just now? Are you crazy?" Su Chan was so scared by Li Yundong's roar that she stammered, I just wanted to help you." Li Yundong said angrily, "Help? Didn't you see what happened to the people who snatched the Dun Jindan just now? What would I do if something happened to you?" Although Su Chan had been yelled at by Li Yundong in front of everyone, she was quite happy in her heart. She pretended to be pitiful, pulled Li Yundong's sleeve, and whispered, "Well, I'll know in the future. Don't yell at me fiercely in front of so many people. I'm fine, aren't I? I promise I won't do it again next time." Li Yundong couldn't stand such soft words. Even if there was anger in his heart, it dissipated a lot at this time. He snorted and pretended to be angry. "Will there be a next time?" Zi Yuan, who was standing to one side, saw that Li Yundong was all talk and no rain. It was obvious that he was no longer angry. She quickly tried to smooth things over and said, "Su Chan, how did you get the Dun Jindan just now?" Su Chan's face lit up, and she said with a smile, "Isn't that easy? Do you remember how I got the Renyuan Jindan last time?" "As soon as I rushed out, someone greeted me with a powerful magical weapon. As soon as I hid, I heard your shouts. How could I have had time to care about the Dun Jindans? Until now, I haven't had time to touch this Dun Jindan." Zhou Qin said with lingering fear, "Fortunately, there were no Jinshan masters this time. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable." Su Chan also said strangely, "Yes, why are there so many cultivators here, but there are no Jinshan masters?" Li Yundong was also stunned. He couldn't help but say in a low voice, "Indeed, it's very abnormal, even a little strange." He turned his head and looked at Zi Yuan. "What do you think?" Zi Yuan pondered for a while and said, if the news was spread by Zheng Yuan, given his nature, he would definitely not inform cultivators with higher cultivation than him. Otherwise, he would be caught in a trap of his own making. However, it was also impossible to transmit the news within these few hours without the slightest leak. However, although the Jinshan masters of the major sects are powerful, they are restraining each other, forming a delicate balance. It's also possible that they are around now, but have been hiding and haven't made a move. Besides, although the Dun Jindans are important to Yang spirit masters like us, they are not so important to Jinshan masters. Maybe they disdain to make a move. Speaking of this, Zi Yuan also felt that her speculation was very unreasonable. She shook her head and said with a smile, I don't know, but at this time, the good news is that there are no Jinshan masters. Otherwise. As soon as she finished speaking, she heard a harsh and arrogant voice. Huh, Shirdi, it's really the birth of the Dun Jindans. Your eyes can be saved. Huh, God has eyes. Today, I pinched my fingers and saw the colorful light flashing in the sky. There must be a strange phenomenon. I rushed over to take a look, and I was right. Ha ha ha. As soon as Li Yundong heard this voice, his face suddenly changed and he looked in the direction of the voice. Two Taoists quickly appeared around the Dun Jindan. Both of their robes looked very sloppy and tattered. One of them, a tall and thin Taoist, covered his eyes with a black cloth. Obviously, he was blind. The other Taoist was short and fat, with a surly and arrogant face. Who else could it be but Su Kong and Su Ling, who had fought with Li Yundong on the Kari Holy Mountain? Li Yundong was shocked. Su Chan, who was beside him, asked curiously, who are these two slovenly ghosts? Zhou Qin frowned and looked at the two of them, then asked, where did these two dirty ghosts come from? Li Yundong looked at Su Ling with a vigilant face and said slowly, what do you think if there is really a Jinshan master coming to steal the Dun Jindans, and this Jinshan master has a grudge against you? Su Chan, Zi Yuan, and Zhou Qin were stunned at the same time. They quickly reacted and their expressions changed. They said in unison, the Lingkong and Lingkong Taoists of Zenkingism. As soon as they finished shouting, Su Ling immediately looked in the direction of their voices and shouted, strange, there are girls here who know me? When Su Ling saw Su Chan, Zi Yuan, and Zhou Qin, his eyes suddenly lit up. He pulled his beard with one hand and said in surprise, how could there be such beautiful women in this world? And there are three of them at the same time? And one of them is a fox spirit? But his eyes soon fell on Li Yundong, who was next to him. Su Ling suddenly became angry and became bold. He laughed angrily and said, it's a small world. Shirdi, guess who I saw again? Su Kong put his head close to his ear and whispered a few words. Su Ling snorted a few times, stared at Li Yundong with hatred, and said, why do you care about them? The Dun Jindans can't run away. Could it be that someone will snatch them away in front of me? Humph, whoever dares to snatch what I like, I'll kill him. His words were extremely arrogant and immediately aroused public anger. A cultivator said angrily, hey, who are you? You're really a yawning toad. How arrogant you are. Which sect are you from? Hurry up and tell me your name. Su Ling didn't even look at him. He flicked his finger at the man who had spoken. With a whoosh, a gust of wind shot out like a bullet and hit the man. The man fell back with a cry, rolled a few times, and then stopped moving. Su Ling grinned hideously and said, what's my name? Did you say please? As soon as an expert made a move, it was obvious whether he was an expert or not. As soon as he made a move, the cultivators hiding in the shadows were all shocked. Some cultivators shouted, everyone, let's go together and kill this guy. As they spoke, everyone shared a common hatred for the enemy. Once again, the powerful magical weapons and magic arts rushed toward Su Ling like stormy waves. Su Ling did not dodge, nor did he use any magic. He stood with his hands on his hips, facing these magic arts and magical weapons without moving, letting them hit him. Everyone saw that every time Su Ling was hit by a powerful magical weapon, a faint golden ripple appeared on his body, as if ripples were spreading out layer by layer. However, he was unscathed, as if he was wearing an invisible armor. At this time, some experienced and knowledgeable cultivators finally understood. They cried out in horror, "Invincible Jinshan, a Jinshan master!" Ding Nan, who had been staring at the scene, also looked at Su Ling in fear. Even if she didn't know how terrifying a Jinshan master was, she had seen so many powerful magical weapons and magic arts coming at him just now, but he had not dodged or been hurt. What did this mean? Ding Nan said in a trembling voice, "Master, what should we do?" Zheng Yuan looked at Su Ling with a livid face. He had calculated everything, but he hadn't expected that this Jinshan master would appear out of nowhere and ruin his good plan. Zheng Yuan's face was gloomy, and he looked at the scene with cold eyes. Like everyone else present, he quickly thought of something. What should we do if a Jinshan master comes to snatch the Diyuan Jindan? Today was the first night watch, and there was one more night watch in the evening. Chapter 577. The sudden appearance of Su Ling was like a ferocious monster appearing in the jungle. The cultivators of all sects were so afraid of the Jinshan masters that they almost lost the will to fight in an instant. Go to the internet. 7 KOM. Even 10 Yang spirits can't beat a Jinshan. This was almost an irrefutable truth in the cultivation world. No matter which sect it was, every senior cultivator would teach this truth to the young cultivators by word and example. The strength of Su Ling made everyone despair, but there were still a few people on the field who were unwilling to give up and quickly thought of countermeasures. Li Yundong stared at Su Ling without saying a word, quickly thinking of a way to deal with it. Although Zhou Qin knew that a Jinshan master was powerful, she was tough and aggressive, like a newborn calf that was not afraid of a tiger. She whispered to Li Yundong, "Master, what should we do? Is there any way to knock him down?" Li Yundong was silent. Zi Yuan said in a low voice, "Jinshan masters can make their invincible Jinshan immune to almost all magic and most magical items. Except for powerful magic circles and a few magical items that can hurt their yang spirits, there is almost no way to break their invincible Jinshan. The Bahuang and Liuhe sword can break his Jinshan, but I believe that he won't be stupid enough to use his Jinshan to block the Bahuang and Liuhe sword." Su Chan also said with a sad face, "If I had known this would happen, would have asked Master for the Bahuang sword." Zi Yuan shook her head and said, "The Bahuang sword and the Liuhe sword were originally mother and son swords. Now that they have been separated, it will not be easy to merge them again. It's useless for you to come." Su Chan was even more disappointed. What should we do? Yundong, think of a way. You won't just watch this guy take away all 3 Diyuan Jindan, will you? At this time, Li Yundong said slowly, "When I was in Kari Holy Mountain, I used the Amateus Buddha seal to hurt this guy, but he quickly recovered. I believe that it can only damage his ability to move for a while, but it can't hurt his foundation." Zhou Qin and Su Chan didn't think much of it, but Zi Yuan was shocked. She said in surprise, "You can actually hurt a Jinshan master? This is too exaggerated, isn't it? This is the first time I've heard of a Yang spirit expert injuring a Jinshan expert." Li Yundong shook his head and said, "It's nothing. I used the Buddhist language Mahamudra. The time it takes to recite the mantra is long enough for you to circle the world 80 times. With such a long chant, I could only injure him lightly. What's there to brag about?" Zhou Qin gritted her teeth and said, "Master, why don't we help you stall him first? You can use the Amateus Buddha seal." Li Yundong's expression turned cold, and he said resolutely, "No." Last time, in order to hold him back, 3 guardian deities died tragically in his hands, and Dorji Tenzin almost lost his life. Moreover, if Meiduo hadn't turned into Tsing Lam, I wouldn't have had time to make this Mahamudra. If you want to hold him back, you'll be courting death. I can't let you take this risk. Zhou Qin said anxiously, but master, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Someone has to take the risk. Li Yundong glared at her and said angrily, if I say no, then no. Even if we have to enter the tiger's den, it can't be you. Su Chan couldn't get a word in. She looked around and suddenly said in a low voice, Yundong, if we really can't do it, we won't snatch this Dun Jin Dan. Anyway, the Medicine King tripod should still be there. How about we snatch it? As long as there's life, there's still hope. Li Yundong suddenly looked at the alchemy room quickly. His heart skipped a beat, and he shouted in a low voice, overjoyed, I have an idea. Su Chan, Zi Yuan, and Zhou Qin were immediately overjoyed and asked in unison, what is it? Li Yundong chuckled. He quickly glanced at the cultivators hiding in the shadows around him and said with a sneer, Wang Jinyuan knows how to divert the trouble. Can't I drive the tiger to swallow the wolf? As he spoke, he suddenly said to Su Chan in a slightly louder voice, Chaner, take the Medicine King tripod and leave first. Don't worry about us. Li Yundong's voice was very subtle. It seemed like he was whispering, but it was just loud enough for Su Ling to hear. Su Ling was stunned and looked around in surprise and ecstasy. He said repeatedly, yes, yes, since the Dun Jin Dan was born here, there must be a Medicine King tripod. Where is the Medicine King tripod? I want it too. This time, everyone was furious. It was fine that this guy had snatched the Dun Jin Dan, but he even wanted to take away the hen that laid the eggs? It was really intolerable. Su Chan didn't understand Li Yundong's sudden words at first, but she soon understood. She nodded cleverly and flew toward the alchemy room without saying a word. Su Ling immediately stopped in front of Su Chan and laughed wildly. So it's here. Little fox, stand aside obediently. If you are obedient, I will let you go if I am in a good mood. Otherwise, I will kill you without saying a word. Su Chan only felt that when he stood in front of her, although he was only short and fat, she felt as if there was a terrifying monster standing in front of her that had not yet shown its fangs. Her heart was beating wildly. She didn't dare to stay. She turned her head and flew back to Li Yundong's side, saying with a face full of righteous indignation, you are so unreasonable. Do you want all the benefits? Su Ling laughed and said, you just realized. This is the advantage of having a big fist. Big fists are the hard truth, haha. As he said this, he turned his head carelessly, as if he was looking down on everyone. With his back to them, he revealed a huge flaw. He pressed his hands against the wall of the alchemy room, and Jinqi all over his body rushed out. For a moment, Su Ling's bones crackled like firecrackers. Then the huge stones of the alchemy room began to tremble, and cracks appeared one after another. Seeing this, Zi Yuan suddenly took a deep breath and said in a low voice, Master once said that Jinshan masters are top cultivators who can break the rules. At that time, I couldn't understand it. Now, it seems that I know what it means. This Su Ling can actually use his own Jinqi to shake the formation inside through the hard rocks, thus breaking the magic formation here. This kind of method is really amazing. Zhou Qin complained, do you still have the mood to praise the enemy at this time? She looked at Li Yundong anxiously and said, Master, it's time to make a move, isn't it? Li Yundong nodded, then immediately shook his head. He said in a deep voice, don't worry. The cultivators of all sects were now all angry, but they didn't dare to say anything. They were so excited that they were like a pile of dry firewood, just short of a raging fire to immediately set the prairie ablaze. When I start a fire, you will follow me in a while. However, you are only allowed to use powerful magical weapons. You are not allowed to approach him. If you find him facing you, run away immediately. Do you hear me? Both Zhou Qin and Zi Yuan nodded. Su Chan asked suspiciously, "What about me?" Li Yundong shook his head and said, "You don't have a powerful magical weapon, so you can't go forward. Help take care of Chris in the distance." Su Chan immediately pouted her lips, looking unhappy. While they were talking, Su Ling had forcibly opened a gap about the width of a person in the alchemy room. At a glance, he saw the Medicine King tripod in the alchemy room and immediately laughed. With a wave of his hand, he took the Medicine King tripod into his hand. With another wave of his other hand, he took 3D Yuan Jindan into his palm. Li Yundong immediately shouted in a low voice, "Do it." In an instant, Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin immediately released their powerful magical weapons. The Liuhe, the Vulcan's whip, and the ninth heaven Zi Yuan silk flew out at the same time, aggressively attacking Su Ling. The Liuhe that Li Yundong had released was not very powerful in a one-on-one fight, but it was so fast that it was impossible to guard against it. Zhou Qin's Vulcan's whip was not a top magical weapon, so it could not cause any harm to Su Ling. However, Zhou Qin had ulterior motives and whipped Su Ling in the face. Even though Su Ling had a jinshan to protect his body, if he was whipped in the face, even if it didn't hurt or itch, he would still be very angry. When people were angry, their emotions would be unstable, and flaws would appear. Among the three magic treasures, Zi Yuan's ninth heaven Zi Yuan silk was the strongest in terms of individual combat effectiveness. When this powerful magical weapon attacked, its whole body suddenly twisted into a ball, like a purple diamond drill, constantly rotating and stabbing toward Su Ling. It was so fast that there were obvious ripples in the surrounding air. Its momentum was so fierce that even a jinshan master like Su Ling couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart and frown fiercely. Su Ling even felt that if this ninth heaven Zi Yuan silk got into his body and he let it go, he was afraid that it would drill a hole in him sooner or later. Although a jinshan master was tyrannical, it did not mean that he was absolutely invincible and invulnerable. As the saying goes, rope saws wood, and dripping water wears through a stone. Su Ling frowned. He raised his hand and flicked his finger, sending the Liuhe flying with a clang. He raised his hand and threw the Medicine King tripod to his shitty, Su Kong. He used his free hand to firmly grab the Vulcan's whip that Zhou Qin had thrown over. The Vulcan's whip was surrounded by flames, roasting Su Ling's fingers, but he didn't seem to feel it. The tip of the whip turned into a fiery red poisonous snake, frantically and ferociously spitting its tongue at Su Kong, constantly struggling. For a moment, Su Ling could not free his hand to catch Zi Yuan's ninth heaven Zi Yuan silk, but he immediately took a deep breath. Su Ling's breath caused a strong wind to blow on Tiandu Peak, as if a whirlpool had appeared with him as the center. The air around him quickly surged toward him and was sucked away by him. At the moment Su Ling took a deep breath, his body swelled like an inflated bullfrog. Then he blew out a breath toward the ninth heaven Zi Yuan silk. This breath was condensed into a straight line by him and accurately blew toward the drill bit of the ninth heaven Zi Yuan silk. Suddenly, the purple drill bit, which was spinning rapidly toward him, stopped abruptly in front of him, as if it had been caught by an invisible giant, unable to move even half a step forward. The cultivators present were all knowledgeable people. They all looked at Su Ling in horror, as if they couldn't believe that this person could block such a powerful magical weapon as Zi Yuan with a single breath. Instead of being shocked, Li Yunyang was delighted. He immediately made two big handprints toward Su Ling and Su Kong at the same time. Su Ling intended to show off his magic cultivation. Caught off guard, he saw a big golden handprint coming toward him. He suddenly felt suffocated, and the aura of resisting the ninth heaven Zi Yuan silk weakened a little. Immediately, Zi Yuan used all her strength to urge the ninth heaven Zi Yuan silk and fiercely stabbed forward. With a puff, the ninth heaven Zi Yuan silk was firmly stuck on Su Ling's shoulder. However, Su Ling had a jinshan to protect him. The ninth heaven Zi Yuan silk just tried its best to drill down on his body, but it couldn't get in. Although Su Kong was blind, his cultivation was still there. Just by listening to the sound, he could tell that a strong qi was rushing toward him. He immediately dodged to the side, but soon Zhou Qin pulled back her Vulcan's whip and whipped it at him. For a moment, Su Kong was in a difficult position. In his anger, he immediately sent his yang spirit out of his body. He simply ignored his physical body and rushed toward Zhou Qin with a roar. But as soon as he moved, Zhou Qin shook her wrist, and the tip of the whip wrapped around one of the Medicine King tripod's feet. Then, with a pull of the whip, the Medicine King tripod was immediately thrown out of his hand and into the air. Seeing this, Li Yunyang immediately laughed and said, "A fat man and a blind man, what's there to be afraid of? Zi Yuan, Zhou Qin, let's go and get the cauldron and the elixir back." At this time, Zheng Yuan, who had been watching quietly, suddenly had a bright light in his eyes. He said to Ding Nan in a low voice, "Pinger, let's go." Ding Nan had long wanted to help Li Yunyang, but she was afraid that if she was too enthusiastic, it would arouse Zheng Yuan's suspicion. Therefore, she retreated in order to advance. She pretended to hesitate and asked, "Master, isn't this the time to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight? Why should we help him?" Zheng Yuan sneered proudly and said, "Humph, Li Yunyang is bluffing. He can't beat this guy, so he wants us to help him fight, so he deliberately used this method to provoke us." Ding Nan asked curiously, "Then don't we have to stand by and watch?" Zheng Yuan snorted and said, "Are you kidding? Apart from me, Li Yunyang is the only one here who can fight with this Jinshan master. If we don't help him fight, this Jinshan master will really take away the Diyuan Jindan. At that time, even if we want to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight, it will be impossible. So, we'd better deal with this damn Jinshan master first." After that, he immediately took a step forward and said loudly to Su Ling, "Zhenren, do you dare to tell me your name?" Su Ling was angry that he had been caught off guard by Li Yunyang. Just as he was about to fight back, he suddenly heard Zheng Yuan's shout. He shouted impatiently, "My name is Su Ling. What do you want?" Zheng Yuan was overjoyed. He quickly took out the Hell Wuzhang enchanting jade and shouted at Su Ling, "Su Ling." Su Ling didn't know that Zheng Yuan had such a vicious powerful magical weapon. He suddenly felt his whole body stiffen. An extremely cold aura penetrated his Jinshan protection and quickly pierced several important acupoints all over his body. Although it couldn't hurt him at all, it froze his qi in blood and slowed down for a moment. The spiritual power of cultivators all came from the operation of qi and blood, and even Jinshan masters were no exception. At this moment, Su Ling's qi and blood stagnated, and his Jinshan immediately weakened. The ninth heaven Zi Yuan silk, which was constantly rotating on his shoulder, suddenly got into his shoulder with a puff. At this moment, everyone's eyes widened. They all realized that this Jinshan master named Su Ling. His Jinshan had been broken. Chapter 578. Su Ling looked at his shoulder in disbelief, as if he couldn't believe that his indestructible body had been broken. His eyes widened, and his gaze changed from surprise to shock, and then from shock to anger. Su Ling subconsciously reached out to grab the ninth heaven Zi Yuan silk that had drilled into his shoulder, trying to pull it out of his body. Watch net. 7 KOM. But as soon as he grabbed the purple silk magic treasure, it immediately changed from a constantly rotating drill to a rapidly cutting blade. Countless tiny blades appeared on its edge, instantly tearing Su Ling's skin. Su Ling's hand was cut into a bloody mess. He roared, but he still clutched the ninth heaven Zi Yuan silk tightly, frantically pulling it out of his body bit by bit. Zheng Yuan knew that if he let Su Ling pull the ninth heaven Zi Yuan silk out of his body, Su Ling would become leakless and regain his invincible Jinshin. At that time, he would be in big trouble. Zheng Yuan immediately shouted again, Su Ling. Almost at the same time, Li Yunyang struck out with his palm again, and Zhou Qin also whipped Su Ling. Su Kong immediately stood in front of Su Ling. He could block the Mahamudra and the Vulcan's whip, but he couldn't block Zheng Yuan's insidious Hell Wuzhong enchanting jade. Su Ling's body stiffened again. Although he had taken precautions this time, he still felt numb all over. The ninth heaven Zi Yuan silk, which was about to be pulled out of his shoulder, plunged deeper into his shoulder. Su Ling was furious, and his eyes turned blood red. He reacted very quickly and simply did not pull it out. Instead, he slapped the bottom of the ninth heaven Zi Yuan silk, causing it to pass through his body. Seeing Su Ling's actions, Zi Yuan was shocked. Oh no! This Su Ling is so ruthless. She immediately controlled the ninth heaven Zi Yuan silk to turn into countless tiny purple threads, drilling into Su Ling's wound. Although the ninth heaven Zi Yuan silk looked like silk, it was actually a magical item transformed from the colorful clouds of the ninth heaven. It could change its shape at will. Once it entered Su Ling's body through the wound, it would immediately take root in his body like an old tree and control his meridians and organs. At that time, no matter how powerful Su Ling was, he would not be able to reverse the situation. However, how could a golden body master be a joke? How could he be easily defeated? After Su Ling forced the ninth heaven Zi Yuan silk out of his body, he was furious and quickly pinched his fingers. His whole body suddenly shone with golden light, and his golden body appeared, as if he was wearing a thick layer of golden armor visible to the naked eye. As soon as the nine heavens purple silk hit the golden armor, it was unable to advance any further and was even sent flying several meters away. When Zheng Yuan was about to shout again, he saw Su Ling glaring at him with terrifying and ferocious eyes. He roared ferociously, "You're courting death." After that, he raised his hand and slapped Zheng Yuan with his palm. Although Su Ling's palm was not as powerful as Li Yunyang's Mahamudra, he was a golden body master after all, and his every move had earth-shattering power. This casual palm suddenly made everyone on Tiandu Peak feel as if the air had been sucked away. Although this palm was not aimed at them, everyone was suffocated by the momentum of this palm. The others were still like this, and Zheng Yuan, who was the first to bear the brunt of it, was so shocked that he trembled all over. There was a flash of fear in his eyes, and he quickly took out a talisman that he had prepared with the immortal pen and shouted, "Earth!" With a bang, a hard and solid stone wall rose in front of him in an instant. This stone wall was made of hard rock, up to 1 meter thick. However, Su Ling's palm immediately smashed the stone wall into pieces, but the palm did not stop there. It fiercely slapped toward Zheng Yuan. Zheng Yuan hadn't expected that the stone wall would not be able to stop the power of this palm at all. He was shocked and had nowhere to hide, so he could only grit his teeth, push out his hands, and take the palm head-on. With a loud bang, Zheng Yuan was hit by the palm, and his whole body shook violently. He spat out a mouthful of blood and knelt on the ground, unable to move for a while. Ding Nan, who was standing to one side, was shocked. She hurriedly bent down and asked, "Master, what's wrong with you?" At this time, the qi and blood in Zheng Yuan's chest were rolling, and the meridians all over his body were in a mess. He stared at Su Ling with hatred, and there was fear in his eyes. He barely opened his mouth and said, Go. If you don't go, you won't be able to." As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately spat out another mouthful of blood. Ding Nan had been cultivating for a long time. She could see at a glance that Zheng Yuan had spat out a mouthful of bright red blood. It was obvious that his internal organs had been injured, and it was an extremely serious internal injury. She was shocked and was about to take Zheng Yuan to escape when she saw Su Ling smiling ferociously. "You want to leave? You want to leave after hurting me? How can it be so easy?" Just as Su Ling was about to kill them all, the powerful magical weapons of Li Yunyang, Zhou Qin, and Zi Yuan arrived one after another. At this time, the other cultivators also came to their senses, and the powerful magical weapons that blotted out the sky and earth rushed toward Su Ling. Su Ling suddenly became furious. While resisting the powerful magical weapons around him, he roared, "Well, none of you can escape today. Even if I have to go through the thunder retribution today, I will kill all of you. Shirdi, protect me." When Su Ling heard this, he immediately reached into his arms and took out 2 talismans. He quickly pinched his fingers and muttered something. The 2 talismans between his fingers suddenly burned. One of the 2 talismans burned with a yellow flame, while the other burned with a green flame. Soon, the 2 flames burned like a prairie fire in the blink of an eye, quickly turning into 2 statues in the air. As soon as the 2 statues appeared, they immediately formed 2 barriers, firmly enveloping Su Ling and Su Ling. As soon as Zhou Qin saw the 2 statues, she was shocked. "What are these?" Zi Yuan was also shocked. She cried out involuntarily, "They seem to be the 32 celestial emperors of Taoism." Zhou Qin asked in surprise, "What are the 32 celestial emperors?" Li Yunyang said with a solemn face, "The yellow one is Taihuang celestial emperor Huangzheng, one of the 8 celestial emperors of the East. He is known as Yujin Yuming. He is in charge of the Book of Longevity and lives in the Ziwei Palace. His name is Yuanyang Yellow, so his whole body is surrounded by yellow flames. The other one is Taiming Yuan Celestial Emperor, also known as Su Natian. He is in charge of the soul rebirth and lives in the Zifang Palace. His name is Shangyang Green, so his whole body is surrounded by green flames." At this time, Zi Yuan gritted her teeth and said, "Damn it, this guy has the protection of Taihuang Celestial Emperor Huangzheng, so his wound is healing. The other one is Taiming Yuan Celestial Emperor, who is used to guard against the Hell Wuzhang Enchanting Jade. If Zheng Yuan calls for souls again, the Taiming Yuan Celestial Emperor will instantly rebirth all the ghosts in the Hell Wuzhang Enchanting Jade." Zhou Qin suddenly gasped. She looked at Su Ling in horror. Under the protection of the 2 Taoist gods, the torn wound on his shoulder was rapidly healing. Then he roared, and the golden light all over his body shook violently. In an instant, the Yang spirit came out of his body, rose into the air, and turned into a shining golden, extremely powerful Tieba god. With the protection of the 2 Taoist celestial emperors, Su Ling could use his golden body without fear. After his Yang spirit came out of his body, he looked down at the people on Tiandu Peak. He grinned grimly and roared, "Go to hell! Go to hell!" He suddenly opened his hands, and his whole body was like a dazzling golden sun, blooming with more and more dazzling light. Li Yunyang was shocked. He immediately turned his head and said to Zi Yuan, "Go and get Chris here." As soon as Li Yunyang spoke, Zi Yuan instantly flashed to Chris, who was already dumbfounded, and pulled her to her side. At this time, Su Ling had already fallen into a state of rage. His golden body was instantly pulled into countless sharp golden threads, shooting indiscriminately in all directions like thousands of arrows. Some of the cultivators who had been hiding in the darkness were pierced by Su Ling's Yang spirit doppelganger without saying a word. Some of them were so frightened that they turned around and ran, but Su Ling's doppelganger quickly caught up with them and mercilessly killed them. When Zheng Yuan, who had been seriously injured, saw this scene, his eyes flashed with despair. He gritted his teeth, quickly took out 3 golden needles from his arms, and pierced them into the Baihui acupoint on the top of his head. The Baihui acupoint was an important acupoint of the human body, and it could mobilize the potential and yuanqi of the human body. Zheng Yuan's piercing was tantamount to quenching his thirst with poison. He suddenly felt refreshed, and a stream of blood qi surged all over his body. His face also became ruddy. He took a deep breath, took out 2 talismans, and recited the incantation. In an instant, the ground under his feet immediately sank. He, Ding Nan, and Alba all fell into a pit and hid in the 9 earths. Li Yunyan quickly pinched the immovable fundamental seal with his hands, and with the posture of a Buddha that could not be moved by the wind, he forcibly blocked Su Ling's terrifying large-scale killing move 3 meters in front of him. Su Chan and the others saw that there seemed to be a rain of golden arrows around them. For a moment, screams and wails rang out one after another. Many cultivators immediately died on the spot. The cultivators who had barely managed to resist did not dare to stay any longer. They quickly turned into beams of blue light and fled from the terrifying Tiandu Peak like wolves and rats. Zhou Qin looked at the raging Su Ling with fear and said in a trembling voice, "Master, what should we do? What should we do?" Li Yunyan also looked at Su Ling in shock and couldn't help but say, "It turns out that he didn't use his full strength last time." Su Chan also looked at Su Ling in horror and said in a trembling voice, "Yundong, we don't want this Dun Jindan anymore. Let's go. This Jinshan master is too powerful. We can't beat him." However, Li Yundong's face was cold and he said in a deep voice, "It's not that there's no way." Su Chan and Zhou Qin were shocked at the same time. They hadn't expected that Su Ling would be so strong that Li Yundong still had a way to deal with him. They asked in unison, "What way?" At this time, Zi Yuan's heart also moved. She looked at Li Yundong with wide eyes and said, "Could it be that you want to?" Li Yundong nodded and pointed to the sky. "Draw heavenly thunder to subdue him." Chapter 579. Li Yunyan's words immediately caused Su Chan, Zi Yuan, and Zhou Qin to involuntarily look up at the sky. They saw that at this time, the bright moon that had originally been hanging high in the sky had disappeared. No one knew when the sky had gathered with a thick layer of dark clouds. Go to the net. 7 KOM. Lightning flashed in the clouds, as if being attracted by the powerful Jinshan power of Su Ling, and the terrifying heavenly thunder was brewing. Cultivators were huge bodies of energy. Usually, they carefully hid their energy in their meridians, 5 internal organs, 3 dantians, and niden, for fear of attracting the attention of heavenly thunder. But at this time, all the power of Su Ling's Jinshan had been released. It was like a super criminal who had committed a lot of crimes and was swaggering in front of the police station. It would be strange if it didn't attract heavenly thunder. However, it often took a long time for heavenly thunder to strike. It was as if heaven was also looking at the world with cold eyes, as if it wanted to see if he wanted to challenge the power of heaven. If this person had the intention to repent, the heavenly thunder would slowly dissipate. This was the so-called heaven has the virtue of caring for all living things. However, Li Yundong didn't want the heavenly thunder to dissipate. He wanted to use his own strength to draw it down and use its power to fight against Su Ling. But Zi Yuan knew that it was really dangerous to attract heavenly thunder. If he was careless, he would be struck into ashes by heavenly thunder. Zi Yuan was shocked and said, "Are you sure? It's not a joke to attract heavenly thunder. What if it goes astray? What if you can't control it and the heavenly thunder hits you? You should know that this is not the heavenly thunder attracted by your strength. This is the heavenly thunder attracted by the power of Jinshan. Its power is far above the heavenly thunder you have attracted before. Can you control it?" Li Yundong gritted his teeth and said, "If I don't try, I'll die." Zhou Qin suddenly said, "Master, why don't you hold him back? I'll take the Medicine King tripod when he's not paying attention, and then we'll leave. What do you think? Li Yundong immediately shook his head and said, "Don't joke. Su Ling can come here after hearing the news. What about those Jinshan masters who got the news? Just now, I was hoping that they might not come, but now, humph, I absolutely don't believe that they are not around. If you make a move, I guarantee that they will catch up with you within a few kilometers. At that time, even I won't be able to save you." Zhou Qin was shocked and looked around in horror. What should we do? If there really are other golden body experts, then why didn't they make a move? Li Yundong's face darkened. I don't know. He could only take it one step at a time. Let's deal with Su Ling first. It's a shame for the Taoists to have such a scum like you. Be careful, God will take you to the west. Seeing that Li Yundong was still unwilling to admit defeat in such a desperate situation, Su Ling suddenly became furious and said with a ferocious smile, "God has eyes? Even heavenly thunder can't kill me. Do you still expect God to open his eyes?" As soon as Su Ling's voice fell, he suddenly heard a loud crack in the air, and an extremely terrifying thunderclap came. This clap of thunder nearly deafened everyone's ears. Chris was so shocked that she almost fainted. Her ears were buzzing, and she almost lost her hearing. She saw a huge bolt of lightning suddenly fall from the sky, engulfing Su Ling in an instant once again. Boom! The power of this thunderbolt was far greater than before. Su Chan, Zi Yuan, and Zhou Qin saw Su Ling's Jinshan Yang spirit being instantly shattered, turning into countless tiny golden spots of light floating in the air. After the thunder and lightning disappeared, they slowly gathered together and once again changed into the shape of the Jinshan Yang spirit. But this time, the golden light emitted by Su Ling's Yang spirit was so weak that it quickly went back into his body. As soon as Su Ling's Yang spirit returned to his body, he immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. The hand holding the Dun Jindan involuntarily loosened. The Medicine King tripod and the Dun Jindan both fell into the air and continued to float without a master. When Su Kong heard Su Ling scream, he hurriedly rushed to him and anxiously transferred Jinqi to him. As soon as he moved, the two original Protector Celestial Emperors also disappeared. Su Kong whispered a few words to Su Ling. His Yang spirit looked at the Dun Jindan and the Medicine King tripod unwillingly, as if he wanted to snatch them again. But at this time, Su Ling grabbed his hand, coughed up blood, and struggled to say in a low voice, "There's thunder, a master of thunder retribution. Hurry, hurry up." With that, he didn't even look at the Dun Jindan and the Medicine King tripod. He pulled Su Kong away and turned into two beams of blue light. At this time, Su Chan, Zi Yuan, and Zhou Qin were already dumbfounded. They stared dumbfoundedly at Su Ling and Su Kong, who were fleeing in panic, and couldn't help turning their heads to look at Li Yundong, who was also confused. Su Chan stammered, "Yundong. You're so powerful. You really beat a Jinshan master away." Li Yundong shook his head like a rattle drum and said, "It wasn't me. I didn't attract the thunder at all just now." Zi Yuan was experienced and knowledgeable. She couldn't help but think of something even more terrifying. She looked around with a pale face and didn't say anything for a while. Zhou Qin didn't see the crux of the matter. She couldn't help but smile in surprise and say, "Anyway, Master, this strong enemy has finally been driven away." Li Yundong also looked around and saw that Tiandu Peak, which had just been fighting fiercely, was now frighteningly quiet, like a huge cemetery. For a moment, Tiandu Peak was empty and dark. Only the sound of the wind could be heard, and there seemed to be no one anywhere. However, Li Yundong faintly felt that in the dark night, there seemed to be a hidden power that was more terrifying than Su Ling's, peeping at him. After looking around vigilantly, Li Yundong waved at the Dun Jindan and the Medicine King tripod floating in the air. The 3 Dun Jindan, which had been repeatedly fought over by everyone and had changed owners several times, suddenly flew toward Li Yundong, and the Medicine King tripod followed closely behind. But just as the 3 Dun Jindan were about to fly in front of Li Yundong, a hole suddenly appeared in the ground not far from him, and 3 figures quickly jumped out of it. One of them laughed wildly and reached out to grab the Dun Jindan. Li Yundong was furious. Without even looking, all the Jinqi in his body poured out like a bomb, slapping toward the man like an avalanche. Chapter 580. After Li Yundong struck out with his palm, he realized that the person in front of him was Zheng Yuan, who had sneaked into the ground before. At this time, Zheng Yuan was not as dispirited and miserable as he had been when he had been seriously injured. Instead, his face was glowing, and his magic power was much stronger than before. Watch net. 7 KOM. When Zheng Yuan saw Li Yundong's palm coming at him, he immediately grabbed Alba, who was beside him, and used her as a shield to resist Li Yundong's fierce palm. Li Yundong was shocked and angry at the same time. If his palm hit her, Alba would immediately turn into a pile of meat paste, and he would also provoke divine punishment. Li Yundong immediately withdrew his palm, forcibly withdrawing his palm's strength. However, it was easier to exert force than to withdraw it. As soon as Li Yundong withdrew his force, Zheng Yuan immediately took out the Hell Wuzhang enchanting jade and shouted, "Li Yundong." Li Yundong's body suddenly trembled, and in an instant, all the qi and blood in his body seemed to be frozen. His body swayed and he almost fell down. Although Li Yunyang had been frozen for less than a second, Zheng Yuan immediately recovered and seized the initiative again. He left Alba behind him with a grim smile, grabbed the Dun Jindan with one hand, and the Medicine King tripod with the other. Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin, who were beside him, also reacted quickly at this time. Zi Yuan shouted loudly, and the 9th heaven Zi Yuan silk turned into a sharp blade, quickly cutting toward Zheng Yuan's wrist. Zhou Qin shook the Vulcan's whip, and the tip of the whip hit the bottom of the Medicine King tripod with a snap, whipping it high. At this time, Zheng Yuan had just grabbed the Dun Jindan in his palm, but he saw that the 9th heaven Zi Yuan silk had already cut his wrist. The sharp rotating blade made his hair stand on end. At this time, Li Yundong had also come to his senses. He turned his hand and struck out with Zi Yuan's palm. In the blink of an eye, the palm force hit Zheng Yuan's body. At this time, Zheng Yuan was no longer on guard. He roared wildly, and his body was suddenly blown away like a straw. His wrist was heavily cut by the 9th heaven Zi Yuan silk. The pain made him involuntarily loosen his 5 fingers as he flew backward. 3 Dun Jindan fell out again and happened to fall less than 2 meters in front of Li Yundong. Zheng Yuan was sent flying 5 meters away by Li Yundong's palm. He spat out a mouthful of blood and looked at Li Yundong with hatred. He was extremely unwilling and thought to himself, "It seems that I can't get it today, but if I can't get it, you can't get it either." Thinking of this, a ferocious look flashed in Zheng Yuan's eyes. He pushed his hands forward, using almost all his strength to push out an extremely fierce palm wind. As the saying goes, a cornered beast will still fight. As the head of the Yin-Yang sect in Mount Wuhua, Zheng Yuan's decades of cultivation were not to be trifled with. At this time, his desperate attack was really amazing. Seeing Zheng Yuan's palm coming toward him, Li Yundong snorted coldly, pinched a Mahamudra, and blasted it at him. But as soon as he blasted out the Mahamudra, he saw Zheng Yuan's palm wind rushing over with 3 Dun Jindan. Li Yundong was shocked and thought to himself, "Oh no! But Li Yundong's Mahamudra had already been blasted out, and it was too late to stop. He watched his Mahamudra and Zheng Yuan's palm collide. With a bang, the Dun Jindan was the first to bear the brunt. Under the pressure of the two palms, it immediately broke and turned into a cloud of powder mist. This cloud of powder mist was surrounded by colorful light, enveloping Li Yundong, Su Chan, Zi Yuan, Zhou Qin, Chris, Ding Nan, and even Alba. Seeing that the Dun Jindan had been destroyed, Li Yundong was about to lose his temper when he heard Zi Yuan suddenly shout in a low voice, "Li Yundong, take a deep breath. This is the divine qi of elixir. Take a deep breath." Li Yundong was stunned and subconsciously took a deep breath. Suddenly, he inhaled a lot of the colorful powder mist, and its range shrank a little. At this time, Zi Yuan, Su Chan, and Zhou Qin all reacted extremely quickly. The three of them took a deep breath and sucked in the pink mist, causing it to shrink by 2/3. The mist that had originally enveloped them became extremely thin. Ding Nan was not a fool. She immediately took a deep breath, but her cultivation was the lowest, so she inhaled the least. Chris understood Chinese. Although she didn't know why she was inhaling, at this time, she had completely lost her subjective consciousness and subconsciously had a herd mentality. She also took a few deep breaths. Alba didn't understand Chinese at all. She just breathed normally and sucked in the last few remaining wisps of divine qi of elixir. Zheng Yuan didn't know that his palm had turned the 3 Dun Jindans into a cloud of divine qi of elixir in an instant. Li Yundong and the others had taken everything. He thought that he had destroyed the Dun Jindan, but he didn't get it, nor did he let Li Yundong take advantage of him. He laughed wildly and jumped up to grab the Medicine King tripod in the air. However, after Li Yundong finished inhaling the divine qi, he quickly made a few big handprints with his hands and slapped them heavily toward Zheng Yuan. At this time, Zheng Yuan's power had been greatly reduced, and he had forcibly tried to grab the Medicine King tripod. Seeing that these palms were coming toward him, he almost blocked all his angles and couldn't hide. He was filled with hatred and anger, so he simply slapped the Medicine King tripod and instantly sent it flying. He watched it disappear into the night in the blink of an eye. He was hit by Li Yundong's palms and fell to the ground with a scream. Zheng Yuan, today is the day you die. Li Yundong saw that Zheng Yuan was simply harming others without benefiting himself. He was extremely sinister and vicious. With a face full of anger, he was about to step forward and kill Zheng Yuan. However, Ding Nan grabbed Alba and shouted, "Li Yundong, if you dare to kill him, I will kill Alba." Li Yundong was furious. He suddenly turned his head, and the zhenqi all over his body was like boiling magma. He said angrily, "Ding Nan, do you want to die?" Ding Nan was so frightened by Li Yundong's roar that she trembled all over. She grabbed Alba and kept retreating, trembling all over. She said in a trembling voice, "You, don't force me." "Force you? No one is forcing you. It's you who are going further and further on the devil's way and sinking deeper and deeper." Li Yundong roared angrily. "If I let him go today, more people will die because of him in the future. Don't you know that?" Of course, Ding Nan knew this, but she also knew that once she lost Zheng Yuan's protection, she would never be able to surpass Zhou Qin in this life. Ding Nan's heart ached as if it had been bitten by a poisonous snake. She smiled bitterly and said, "I don't know anything. I only know that if you take one step closer, she will die." Li Yundong was extremely angry. He took a step forward and was about to shout angrily when he suddenly felt the qi in his body surging like a tsunami. His meridians were in a mess, as if they were rebelling. Li Yundong was shocked. He knew that he had inhaled the divine aura of elixir of Dun Jindan, and at this time, the medicine had already taken effect. Li Yundong's cultivation was the highest here. After absorbing the medicine, he had mobilized his Jinqi violently, so the medicine had taken effect the fastest. He only felt that for a moment, his whole body was extremely hot, his head was dizzy, and his vision gradually blurred. Li Yundong was secretly horrified. He was afraid that once he fell, it would cause Zheng Yuan's ferocious counterattack. Once Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin fought back, they would immediately be like him, and the medicine would take effect in an instant. Li Yundong's body was in turmoil, but he didn't show any of it on his face, like a calm lake. He gritted his teeth and forced his voice to sound normal. "Hurry, get out of here. Don't let me see you again." Ding Nan couldn't believe that Li Yundong had really let her go. While dragging Alba, she looked at Li Yundong in horror and walked step by step toward Zheng Yuan. Although Zheng Yuan was seriously injured, he was like a centipede. He struggled to stand up. After glancing at Li Yundong with fear and hatred, he quickly took out a talisman from his arms, grabbed Ding Nan, and shouted in a low voice, "Let's go." Soon, a yellow light flashed, and he, Ding Nan, and Alba immediately disappeared on the spot. Seeing Ding Nan escape with Alba, Zhou Qin asked loudly in shock and anger, "Master, why did you let her run away? Why didn't you bring Alba back?" But as soon as she finished speaking, she saw Li Yundong fall to the ground with a thud. His skin seemed to be on fire, turning a terrible blood-red color. The breath coming out of his sinuses was extremely hot, as if it could burn the air. Zhou Qin was shocked. She quickly squatted beside Li Yundong and asked in panic, "Master, what's wrong with you?" At this time, Zi Yuan also noticed that something was wrong. She felt cold all over, as if she had fallen into an ice cave. The qi in her body was uncontrollably rampaging. She said in a trembling voice, "Oh no, the medicine of Dun Jindan has taken effect. Hurry, hurry up. Otherwise, once someone comes and we have no one to protect us, we will be in danger." Zhou Qin was shocked. She soon noticed that something was wrong in her body. Su Chan also exclaimed, "Ah, it's so cold. Why is it so cold?" At this time, Zi Yuan's face was full of unbearable pain. She said in a trembling voice, "This is the Yuanyin qi stimulated by the medicine. The Dun Jindan is refining our Yuan qi. We have to meditate immediately, otherwise, we will die." As soon as she finished her words, she swayed a few times and fell to the ground. Although the cultivation of Zhou Qin and Su Chan was lower than that of Li Yundong and Zi Yuan, and they were triggered later, the medicine took effect faster. They helped Li Yundong and Zi Yuan up one by one. After taking a few steps, they also fell to the ground with a thud. Su Chan fell on the cold rock ground. In a daze, she saw a few golden lights suddenly flash in the sky, and a few Taoists appeared in front of them. One of them shouted in a rough voice, "Xixiang, we're late. All the Dun Jindan have been robbed." Su Chan barely glanced at the man, only to see that he had a rough appearance, with tiger-like eyes and a lion-like nose. Next to him stood a middle-aged man of medium height, who looked extremely dignified. Next to these two people stood Zhang Cuni of the Qingqing sect. Su Chan's heart suddenly skipped a beat, and she thought to herself, "Damn it, the people of the Qingqing sect. Why did they come at this time? This is terrible." As soon as this thought flashed through her mind, Su Chan saw a black shadow flash by, and a familiar voice came, "Let's go." Su Chan was ecstatic. She knew that the owner of this voice was her master, Ao Wushuang. Ao Wushuang quickly pinched her fingers, and the talisman in her hand instantly burned. Then, the Taoists of the Qingqing sect shouted angrily, "Evildoer, where are you going?" As they said this, the powerful magical weapons and magic in their hands instantly smashed over. Su Chan saw that these powerful magical weapons were about to hit them, but she suddenly felt her body lighten. There was a flash of dazzling yellow light around her, and she, Li Yundong, and the others appeared in another place in an instant. Su Chan only felt that her eyelids were heavy. She struggled to open her eyes and look around, trying to find Ao Wushuang's figure. But when she found Ao Wushuang's figure, she saw another tall black shadow standing beside Ao Wushuang. This person stood in the moonlight, against the light, and his face could not be seen clearly. Only a pair of eyes were staring at Li Yundong, silent. Who is this person? After this thought flashed through Su Chan's mind, she fell into a deep coma. Chapter 581. When Ao Wushuang reappeared with Su Chan and the others, she was in her home in Shantang, Dongwu City. She stared at Su Chan, who was in a coma, and couldn't help but show a sense of love and pity. She gently bent down and used her hand to push away the messy hair on Su Chan's forehead. Her eyes were a little complicated. Go to see the net. At this time, the man behind her took a slight step forward and observed Li Yundong with interest. Half of his face was illuminated by the moonlight, revealing a rather handsome man's face. It was Lu Yi, the former leader of the Fox Zen school. He said, "Why? Chan'er finally has a chance to break through the realm of the six-tailed fox spirit. Aren't you happy for her?" Ao Wushuang tilted her face slightly and said in a cold voice, "What's there to be happy about? I'd rather she be safe for the rest of her life." Lu Yi snorted and said, "Be safe? How can it be so easy? When we fox spirits walk in the world, peace is an extravagant hope. Only by constantly strengthening ourselves can we ensure true peace." Ao Wushuang said coldly, "Are you satisfied now? Li Yundong has finally gotten the Dun Jin Dan. Your big plan can finally be implemented." Lu Yi didn't say anything. He just stared at Li Yundong and didn't say anything for a long time. After a long time, he sighed softly and said, "Sometimes I really envy this guy. He's young, smart, talented, and even rarer, he has all kinds of great opportunities. He has everything a cultivator desires. Look, he has only cultivated for more than half a year, and he's about to break through the Jinshan phase. Alas, this kind of cultivation speed is truly unprecedented since ancient times." Ao Wushuang snorted and said, "Wang Chongyang of the Chuanzhen sect started cultivating at the age of 48 and became a great cultivator in a year." "What do you mean?" Lu Yi said disapprovingly, "That's because Lu Dongbin and Han Zhongli have enlightened him. It's different." Ao Wushuang also looked at Li Yundong, and there was some emotion in her eyes. More than half a year ago, this boy was as weak as an ant in front of her, but now, he was about to break through the most important bottleneck of a cultivator, the Jinshan phase. Once Li Yundong broke through to the Jinshan phase, he would no longer be his match. His Mahamudra and all kinds of magical items would completely suppress him in all aspects. Ao Wushuang stared at him, and a thought suddenly came to her mind. Fortunately, this guy is not my enemy, nor is he the enemy of the Fox Zen school. Otherwise, it would really be the end of the Fox Zen school. Ao Wushuang looked at him for a while and suddenly said, "Why didn't you make a move earlier? Wasn't he afraid that he wouldn't be able to get the Dun Jin Dan? When that golden body expert appeared, I thought you had given up and didn't plan to make a move." Lu Yi smiled and said, "The bald donkeys of Shiyuan Temple and Jinshan Temple are watching me every day. As long as I show my head, they will appear nearby. As long as I take action, they will definitely take action. And do you think Su Ling is the only one nearby? As far as I can sense, there are no less than 5 golden body experts near Celestial Capital Peak. However, these guys are all narcissistic and arrogant. They think that they are the few great cultivators in the world. On the one hand, they disdain to fight for it, and on the other hand, they are afraid that once they make a move, others will take advantage of them. Ao Wushuang sneered and said, "A group of hypocrites. If you want to snatch it, just snatch it. Why are you so cautious? This is what I like about Li Yundong. He's not like these hypocrites. They want to be whores and set up a chastity memorial." Lu Yi snorted and said, "If he was really decisive, he should have taken the Dun Jindan and run away as soon as possible, so that I wouldn't have to waste so much effort later." Ao Wushuang said coldly, "If he left, what about Chon'er, who came later? Do you think he is like you? Can he leave the people around him at any time?" Lu Yi was not angry in the face of Ao Wushuang's accusation. Instead, he raised his eyebrows and said, "A real man should not be so wishy-washy. However, this guy looks like a good and honest man, but he deliberately didn't put away the Dun Jindan. This is a sinister and vicious means, which caused the cultivators of all sects to fight and completely upset the situation. TSK, not bad." Ao Wushuang snorted and said, "Bah, you are always scheming against others. Do you think that everyone in the world is scheming against others all the time like you?" Lu Yi snorted and said with a sneer, "If I don't scheme against others, others will scheme against me." Ao Wushuang sneered and said, "So you even schemed against your own people? Aren't you afraid that something will go wrong in the end? Why didn't you take action earlier just now? What if Li Yundong was killed by Su Ling?" Lu Yi said disapprovingly, "How can the reincarnation of Wisdom King die so easily?" When Ao Wushuang heard the words, "reincarnation of Wisdom King," she suddenly frowned. She looked at Li Yundong with an extremely complicated look in her eyes. After a long time, she suddenly asked, "When did you break through the eight-tailed realm?" The eight-tailed realm is equivalent to the primary stage of thunder retribution. Why didn't you just grab the Dun Jindan yourself just now? Why did you waste so much effort and beat around the bush? Lu Yi chuckled and said meaningfully, "Do you think I'm the only thunder retribution master there?" Ao Wushuang was shocked. "Are there other thunder retribution masters?" Lu Yi sneered and said, "As far as I can tell, there are at least 3 thunder retribution masters nearby." Ao Wushuang was shocked. "What? 3 thunder retribution masters? 3 of the 5 thunder retribution masters have come? Why didn't they take action? Are they also arrogant?" Lu Yi laughed and said, "When the thunder retribution masters fight, it will be a disaster. What's more, they are very afraid of each other, so they didn't come with their real bodies. They just spied on us with their divine senses." Ao Wushuang asked, "Do you know which 3? Lu Yi thought for a moment and said seriously, "One of them is from the Chuanjin sect. I can't tell which sect it is, but it doesn't seem to be the Chuanjin Dragon sect. I feel that the aura of this Thunder Retribution Master is very strange and unique. It should be a very remote branch of the Chuanjin sect. The other 2 seem to be from the Zhengyi school." Ao Wushuang was shocked. 2 of them are from the Zhengyi school? When did the Zhengyi school have 2 Thunder Retribution Masters? Lu Yi nodded, his eyes full of vigilance. He said, "One of them seems to be the aura of Zhang Tianshi, the leader of the sect. No one can fake that kind of vigorous Xianmen sect qi. I can't tell the other one from him." Ao Wushuang became more and more surprised. "Isn't the leader of the Zhengyi school in the Jinshan realm? When did he break through to the Thunder Retribution realm?" Lu Yi said disapprovingly, "Since Wang Yuanshan betrayed the Zhengyi school, Zhang Tianshi has been in seclusion. When he was in seclusion, he was at the highest level of the Jinshan realm, the immortal Jinshan. 10 years have passed. Is it strange that his immortal Jinshan has broken through to the Thunder Retribution realm?" Ao Wushuang thought about it and suddenly felt relieved. She thought to herself, even Lu Yi, an old fox, can break through from a 7-tailed fox to an 8-tailed fox in the past 9 years, let alone the leader of the Zhengyi school. At this time, Ao Wushuang sighed with emotion and said, when Renyuan Jindan appeared, I felt that the cultivation world had been stirred up by this Renyuan Jindan. All the major sects seemed to have woken up from hibernation in an instant. Now it seems that the real storm is yet to come. How many people have died because of the Dun Jindan this time? Lu Yi sneered and said, if they don't die, how can my plan be carried out? Ao Wushuang was silent for a long time. She came to Su Chan's side again and said in a cold voice, I'll say it for the last time. I will do what you ask me to do. However, if you dare to drag Chana in, I will die with you. Lu Yi smiled and said, as long as you do as I tell you, I promise that she will be fine. Humph, when the celestial fox appears, I'll see how long the major sects can maintain their prestige. As he said this, he smiled proudly and said, Li Yundong has gained a blessing in disguise. I didn't expect that the 3 Dun Jindans would benefit a few people. Even I didn't expect that the Dun Jindan could be taken like this. Wonderful, it's really wonderful. Now, as long as he passes the time limit and is given some time, the strength of the Fox Zen school will increase greatly, and my plan will go further. At this time, Ao Wushuang's eyes fell on Chris, who was also unconscious. She suddenly said, what about this foreigner? She seems to have also absorbed the divine aura of elixir. Lu Ye's eyes flickered and he smiled. This foreigner is lucky to be able to absorb the divine aura of elixir. Hehe, it's really fate. Ao Wushuang had also heard from Su Chan that Chris had chased after Li Yundong and wanted to be his disciple. She asked, do you think Li Yundong will accept her as his disciple? Lu Yi snorted and sneered contemptuously. Does she deserve to be his disciple? These Westerners, when they were still /and-burn farming, our ancestors had already begun to cultivate. When they were still creating words, Fuxi had already created the Book of Changes. Even now, these foreigners can't understand what was written more than 5,000 years ago. Do you expect them to understand cultivation? What a joke! Can they understand the inner canon of the Yellow Emperor? Can they understand what qi, blood, and meridians are? However, Ao Wushuang shook her head and said, that's not true. I heard from Su Chan that this girl seems to have some Chinese blood, and she is very yearning for Chinese culture. Lu Yi sneered and said, if I were Li Yundong, I wouldn't accept this foreigner as my disciple. In the 5,000 years of the Chinese cultivation world, no one has ever broken this rule. However, Ao Wushuang sneered and said, really? Why do I hear that many sects have developed abroad and have their own believers? There is even a saying in the cultivation world that there are masters overseas? Lu Yi said disapprovingly, humph, the birthplace of Chinese culture is the Central Plains. If there are no masters here, where can there be masters? What kind of masters can there be in those remote and barbarian lands? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly frowned and looked out of the window. He said in a deep voice, the bald donkeys of Shiyuan Temple and Jinshan Temple are chasing after us again. I'll leave first. You can protect them later. This is a busy city. I believe these cultivators dare not act recklessly. After that, his figure flashed and he disappeared in an instant. At this time, on the distant Mount Wuhua, Zheng Yuan and Ding Nan had already returned to their cave residences. Alba, who had been kidnapped, also appeared next to them. Alba looked around in horror and despair. The cheerleader of the University of Pennsylvania had no idea what kind of fate awaited her. Even Ding Nan herself didn't know what kind of change she would usher in after the Battle of Tiandu Peak. Chapter 582. As soon as Zheng Yuan returned to the cave residence in Mount Wuhua, he suddenly knelt on the ground as if he had lost all his strength. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face turned frighteningly pale. He took out a medicine bottle from his arms, trembling all over, and and swallowed almost all the pills in the bottle in one breath. Go to see. This was the 9 turns yang restoration pill, a life-saving elixir that Zheng Yuan had kept for many years. As long as one was still breathing, taking this elixir would allow him to breathe again. After taking the elixir, Zheng Yuan immediately sat down to meditate. Before he did so, he said to Ding Nan beside him, "Pinger, I'm going to meditate to recuperate. Protect me and stop anyone from disturbing me." At this time, the efficacy of the Dun Jin Dan was also slowly taking effect. She only felt that her whole body was extremely cold, her head was heavy, her feet were light, and her head was dizzy. She subconsciously responded, but soon after Zheng Yuan entered a meditative state, she staggered and leaned against the wall. Alba, who had been taken back, looked around in horror. She saw that she was in a stone room with several cabinets on the walls. There were all kinds of rare antiques on the cabinets, as well as some exquisite medicine bottles and jars. In the middle of the stone room, there was an altar against the wall. On the altar was a futon, and on the left and right sides of the futon were 2 incense burners. Sandalwood was burning in the incense burners, and an 8 diagrams was hanging on the futon. The whole place was filled with a mysterious and strange oriental atmosphere. Alba felt like she had just had a nightmare. She looked around stiffly and pinched her thigh hard, as if she would wake up from her nightmare after a sharp pain. She would return to the green lawn of the University of Pennsylvania and enjoy the happy and comfortable sunshine again. But reality was extremely cruel. Alba only felt a sharp pain in her thigh, but she was still in this demonic place. Alba thought about how her nightmare had begun since she had decided to come to Mount Huangshan with Chris and John. John had fallen into the abyss, and it was unknown whether he was alive or dead. She had even become a hostage, and there was a language barrier. Her mobile phone had fallen in the panic. How could she escape and regain freedom when she was unfamiliar with this place? For a moment, Alba felt so sad that she almost burst into tears. But at this time, Ding Nan, who had already taken effect, suddenly fell to the ground with a thud. Alba was shocked. She looked back and was surprised to find that both Zheng Yuan and Ding Nan had fallen into a coma. Alba could hardly believe her eyes. She carefully stood up and bowed, like a frightened deer trying to see if a beast was asleep. After carefully observing Zheng Yuan and Ding Nan for a while, she finally determined that they had indeed fainted. At this time, Alba could not help but be ecstatic. Her heart beat faster for a moment, and she could not help but run out of the cave. As she ran, she was afraid that Zheng Yuan and Ding Nan would suddenly wake up. If she was caught, she would inevitably be tortured, so she ran with ecstasy and looked back in horror. The reason why traditional Chinese medicine believed that fear injures the kidney, anger injures the liver, joy injures the heart, thinking injures the spleen, and sadness injures the lungs, was that when people were most afraid, the blood flow in their bodies would instantly slow down, causing them to feel weak, cold, and even tremble. The human body's own small universe had a strong self-regulation function, so the kidneys would mobilize a large amount of essence qi that was usually stored in the kidneys. Sometimes, if a person's essence qi was mobilized too much, it would lead to death from essence exhaustion, and people would be scared to death. Similarly, when people were ecstatic, their blood would flow too fast in an instant, and their blood vessels would expand. The heart would suddenly bear a huge burden and pressure of blood transport, and suddenly deliver a large amount of blood in a short period of time. This would also cause the heart of the human body's middle dantian to lose a lot of heart qi, which would lead to extreme joy turns to sorrow. Alba was both happy and frightened. Her heart and kidneys suddenly suffered a great loss. Although she had no foundation in cultivation, this stimulation immediately aroused the medicinal effect of the divine qi of elixir. When she ran to the door of the cave, she suddenly fell to the ground without saying a word. After an unknown period of time, Alba woke up from her coma. After waking up, she looked around blankly for a while, but soon jumped up in fear. With this jump, Alba felt as if her whole body was full of strength. She didn't know that she had already inhaled the divine qi of the Dun Dan. Although it was only a little, it was enough to make her whole body undergo earth-shaking changes. The abundance of her essence, qi, and blood had far exceeded that of ordinary people. When people's qi and blood were vigorous, they would also become bolder. Alba glanced behind her and saw that Ding Nan was surrounded by colorful light, which was mysterious and strange. Zheng Yuan's head was constantly steaming with white qi, as if he was an immortal. Alba was stunned. She muttered to herself in horror and curiosity, "Why are these Chinese people so strange? For God's sake, they are so strong. How could they have been beaten so badly more than 100 years ago? Who can tell me why? If Chinese people are so powerful, why haven't they unified the world?" But Alba had no time to think about this question. She turned around and ran out. Zheng Yuan's cave residence was in the depths of Mount Wuhua, and he usually did not allow other disciples to come to his residence. As soon as Ding Nan thought of this, evil thoughts rose in her mind, and her eyes slowly became cold as she looked at Alba. Seeing that Ding Nan's eyes were getting colder and colder, Alba was frightened and subconsciously wanted to turn around and run away. However, Ding Nan sneered, reached out, and grabbed her neck. She picked her up like a chicken and said, "Come back with me." Although Alba struggled desperately, how could she break free from Ding Nan's hands? The poor cheerleader was dragged back by Ding Nan like an animal. When she saw that she had returned to this dark and cold stone room, she suddenly burst into tears in despair. Although Ding Nan did not intend to let her go, seeing her crying like a pear blossom in the rain, she couldn't help saying, "Don't cry. I won't hurt you, as long as you're obedient." Alba cried, "What did I do? Why won't you let me go? What did I do wrong?" At first, Ding Nan listened quietly, but when she heard Alba keep repeating these words, she finally couldn't help but roar loudly, "You're asking me? Who should I ask? What did I do wrong? Why did I end up like this, making the man I love hate me so much that he wants to kill me with his own hands? Answer me, why?" Alba was frightened by Ding Nan's roar. For a moment, there were still tears on her face. She stared at her blankly, unable to speak. At this time, Zheng Yuan seemed to be alarmed by Ding Nan's roar and woke up from his meditation. Although his face was still gray, it was much better than before. After taking a deep breath, he said in a hoarse and tired voice, "Pinger, what happened? What did you shout just now?" Ding Nan forced a smile and said, "Master, are you awake?" "It's nothing. I was quarreling with this foreign girl. She wants to go back." "Go back?" Zheng Yuan snorted coldly. He glanced at Alba contemptuously and sneered. "She wants to leave now that she's here? Dream on." Zheng Yuan retracted his gaze and glanced at Ding Nan, only to find that Ding Nan's eyes were full of vitality, and her whole body was exuding an extremely powerful Yuanyin qi. He was surprised and couldn't help saying, "Pinger, your cultivation has increased greatly." Ding Nan naturally knew that it was because she had absorbed the spiritual qi of the elixir of life. She smiled flatteringly and said, "It's all thanks to you, master." "It's all thanks to me?" Zheng Yuan was not a fool. He hadn't noticed the abnormality of the Dun Dan being slapped into a mortal mist before, but at this time, Ding Nan's cultivation had suddenly soared, and she was about to reach the top level of the Yang spirit realm. If he still couldn't react to such a strange cultivation speed, it would be a waste of his cultivation. Shocked and angry, Zheng Yuan cried out involuntarily, "That cloud of smoke is the spiritual qi of the elixir of life? You also absorbed it? Li Jiandong and the others also absorbed it?" Ding Nan saw the shock, anger, and jealousy in Zheng Yuan's eyes. Her heart skipped a beat, and she quickly knelt down and said in a trembling voice, "Master, I didn't mean to. At that time, I just..." Zheng Yuan looked at Ding Nan in front of him with a gloomy expression. He was so jealous and hateful that he almost bled. He just wanted to drain all the blood in her body in an instant and then dig out all the spiritual qi in her body for his own enjoyment. However, the medicinal power of the Diyuan Jindan dissolved very quickly, and Ding Nan was a rare good furnace. Soon, the medicinal power was completely dissolved. It was too late for him to do anything else. Since it was over, Zheng Yuan could only suppress the jealousy that was gnawing at his heart. He forced a smile and said, "Good Pinger, this is also your own good fortune. I am not as good as you." Ding Nan was extremely good at observing people's expressions. Just now, she had even noticed a flash of murderous intent in Zheng Yuan's eyes. She was shocked and wanted to resist, but Zheng Yuan had accumulated power for a long time and had an extremely overbearing powerful magical weapon in his hands. Although she had the threaded hairpin of soul traversing, she didn't know many magic. If they really fought, she would definitely be in danger. At this critical moment, Ding Nan thought quickly and immediately said with a charming smile, "Master, if I'm good, isn't that good for you?" Her words made Zheng Yuan's heart skip a beat. He saw that the beautiful Ding Nan was pleasing him with a charming smile on her face. He thought to himself, yes, as the leader of the Yin-Yang sect, isn't he best at the art of the yin and yang integration in the bedroom? Zheng Yuan laughed and said, "Good Pinger, you're right. If you're good, isn't that good for me? I'll try the yin and yang integration with you. Let me experience the magical power of the spiritual qi of the elixir of life." When Ding Nan suddenly heard this, she wanted to slap herself in the face. Her face suddenly stiffened, and her hand unconsciously reached for the threaded hairpin of soul traversing behind her. She gritted her teeth and thought to herself, "This old pervert finally can't stand it anymore. If you dare to touch me, I'll die with you." Chapter 583. Zheng Yuan was also a shrewd man. When he heard that Ding Nan was going to practice the yin-yang integration technique with him, his expression suddenly changed, and his eyes showed strong resistance and hostility. Go to the internet. For a moment, Zheng Yuan was very suspicious. LV Fengping used to be a very coquettish woman. She had always been very active in practicing the yin-yang integration technique, but since she had occupied this body, her temperament had changed greatly. Is she Pinger or not? Zheng Yuan looked at Ding Nan in bewilderment. His eyes narrowed more and more, and a strong killing intent gradually appeared in them. Seeing Zheng Yuan's reaction, Ding Nan's heart suddenly trembled. She knew that she was no match for him. Even though he was seriously injured at this time, who knew what other tricks he had up his sleeve? Ding Nan had an idea and immediately said with a charming smile, "Master, do you want to practice the yin-yang integration technique with Pinger?" "That's great. But..." Zheng Yuan stared at her coldly. "But what?" Ding Nan nestled up to Zheng Yuan in an enchanting manner and said charmingly, "Master, your body is so weak now. Aren't you afraid that I'll suck you dry?" Zheng Yuan stared at Ding Nan. After a long time, he laughed and said, "Do you think I'm old?" Ding Nan smiled charmingly and said, "Of course I'm old, but Pinger is worried about you. As the saying goes, beauty is a source of calamity." Seeing Ding Nan acting coquettishly, Zheng Yuan's original doubts suddenly dissipated a lot. He laughed and said, "What you said is not unreasonable." As he spoke, he looked at Alba, only to see that although Alba was a Western woman, her pelvic bones were tightly locked and her eyebrows were not open. Obviously, she was a virgin. What was more rare was that her eyes were full of vitality. In addition, she didn't know any cultivation techniques, so she was simply the best cauldron for plucking. Zheng Yuan was overjoyed and said with a smile, "Well, I'll let you go today. I want to have a taste of this foreign girl today." As he said this, he got up and walked toward Alba step by step. Although Ding Nan had successfully dispelled Zheng Yuan's doubts, she hadn't expected that he would change his target and target Alba again. She was shocked and shouted, "Master!" Zheng Yuan tilted his head slightly and said meaningfully, "Why, do you think I can't deal with a girl who hasn't even reached the Zhuji phase?" When Ding Nan heard this, she suddenly swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth. She forced a smile and said, "Master, what are you talking about? I mean, the Caucasian is very powerful. Be careful." He walked over to Alba, grabbed her chin with one hand, and said with a proud smile, "Little girl, serve me well. Maybe if I'm happy, I'll accept you as my disciple." After that, he took Alba and was about to walk into the inner room. Alba was not a fool. Although she couldn't understand the conversation between Ding Nan and Zheng Yuan, she could see the look in the man's eyes when he was beastly. She suddenly struggled violently and shouted at Ding Nan in horror, "Help, help me." Ding Nan watched helplessly as Alba was carried on Zheng Yuan's shoulder and taken into the inner room. She gritted her teeth and turned her face away, not wanting to watch this scene anymore. However, Alba's cries kept coming from the inner room, cutting Ding Nan's eardrums and heart like a sharp knife. "Help! Oh my God, is no one going to save me? Don't you have any brothers and sisters? If one day you see them being insulted like this, will you stand by and watch? Didn't you promise me that you wouldn't hurt me? You liar! You liar! You just said that you have a man you love. Do you know why he hates you? Just because you did such a thing. Do you still have any humanity? Do you still have a conscience? If he knows what you've done, how will you face him in the future?" Alba's screams almost tore Ding Nan apart. She instantly remembered that she had planned to frame Zhou Qin, but she had been framed by Zhou Qin. She had cried in despair in the room. Ding Nan suddenly seemed to understand why Zhou Qin had suddenly turned around at that time and saved her from the clutches of He Xiao. Could it be, because I had cried and said something like, "How will you face him in the future?" Ding Nan's heart trembled violently. There seemed to be a voice in her mind shouting crazily, "If he finds out what you've done in the future, do you still expect him to look you in the eye? It's useless. Even if you become a golden immortal, it's useless. Li Yundong won't even look at you," she thought. At this moment, Alba suddenly let out a miserable scream. Ding Nan suddenly trembled all over. She gritted her teeth, immediately took out the threaded hairpin of soul traversal, and rushed into the stone room. However, when Ding Nan rushed to the door, she suddenly stopped in her tracks. She took a deep breath and quickly calmed down. She even unbuttoned 2 buttons on her chest, revealing a snow-white chest in a deep ravine. After Ding Nan tidied herself up, she walked into the stone room and saw Zheng Yuan panting as he dealt with Alba, who was struggling hard. If it had been in the past, Alba would have been exhausted long ago, but she had just been transformed by the Diyuan Jindan, so her strength was far greater than that of an ordinary person. In addition, Zheng Yuan had been seriously injured before, and he was unwilling to waste his essence qi to control Alba with magic. As a result, he had forced himself on her and made himself quite embarrassed. Zheng Yuan felt someone coming from behind him. He turned his head warily, only to see Ding Nan standing behind him in a seductive manner. He was stunned and asked, "Pinger, what are you doing here?" Ding Nan deliberately covered her mouth and laughed. Seeing that Ding Nan was standing there in a daze for a moment, Alba cried and said to Ding Nan, "I knew you were a good person. Thank you for saving me. Thank you so much. God will protect you. I won't tell anyone about what happened today. I promise. But no matter what she said, Ding Nan remained motionless like a wooden man. Seeing that Ding Nan didn't respond, Alba asked tentatively, "Can I go now?" After asking, she saw that Ding Nan still didn't respond, so she finally got up and wanted to go out. But as soon as she reached the door, she heard Ding Nan say in a cold voice, "Where do you want to go?" Alba trembled all over and said in a trembling voice, I want to go home." Ding Nan slowly turned her face, and a strange and ferocious expression appeared on her pretty face. "You watched me kill John, and then you watched me kill my master. Where else do you think you want to go?" Alba was shocked. She knelt down with a thud and begged bitterly, "Let me go. I definitely won't tell anyone. I definitely won't tell anyone. Don't kill me." Ding Nan walked slowly to Alba's side. She lifted Alba's chin with her finger and said with a sneer, "From today on, I will be the leader of the Yin-Yang sect in Mount Wuhua, and you will be my new disciple. If one day I find that you want to escape, I will cut off your left leg if you take a step with your left leg, and your right leg if you take a step with your right leg. If you take a step with both legs, I will make it so that you will never be able to stand up again. Do you understand? As the saying goes, a woman's heart is the most poisonous." At this time, Alba was scared out of her wits. For a moment, she looked at Ding Nan in a daze. She suddenly felt that the beautiful woman in front of her was vicious and cruel, even more so than Zheng Yuan. She felt as if she had just escaped from the claws of a wolf and immediately fell into the mouth of a tiger. Alba didn't know that her cultivation career would begin in such an unpleasant way, but what she didn't know was what kind of cultivation achievements she would achieve in the future, and what kind of terrifying, great cultivator her master, Ding Nan, would become. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.